Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у щах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The lead Supreme Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1117 of the War News stream. And we did survive the tornadoes, by the way. We are safe, and thank you, everybody, for asking. And we have some massive news to cover today. The U.S. forces are destroying the Iran-backed Yemeni rebels with massive strikes. Also, Syria is now launching attacks on Lebanon, and Ukraine's also launched another massive drone assault. And we have news from literally every region of the world today. It's good to see you all once again.
And, of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of news from around the world. Once again, a major apology for everyone who missed the stream yesterday. If you were wondering where was the stream was not running because we were having to, once again, much like we have pretty much every year running this channel, run and hide from tornadoes. One tornado, I believe, came within about 6 miles of us. It ended up killing about 3 people in the state of Alabama, but it did not hit us, and everything is once again right back to normal. But we do have absolutely shocking and amazing news coming from every single corner of the globe today, as we have been able to hear that the armed forces of the United States of America have been conducting major airstrikes as well as naval strikes against Yemeni Houthi targets within the area of Western-controlled Yemen, where we have been able to see that it appears that there has been a significant amount of damage. And we've also been able to hear additional details as well, that it appears that the Yemeni Houthis will not be backing down, and have in fact stated that they will be now banning all U.S. vessels from transiting the Red Sea. And we've also been able to see that 18 anti-ship missiles and drones were fired at the USS Harry S. Truman's carrier strike group today. All missiles were intercepted, but the United States of America has made it clear the airstrikes will continue until the Yemeni Houthis' aggressiveness ends. We have also been able to hear within other regions of the Middle East that conflict is now brewing in the most unexpected of ways, as we have now been able to hear that Hezbollah itself has attacked the Harir Tahrir otherwise known as the Syrian Interim Government, in a surprise attack today, taking and executing 5 interim government soldiers. In response to this, we've been able to hear that the Syrian Interim Government has now begun mass rocket barrages against the Hezbollah forces within side of Lebanon, and we've also been able to hear that there may be some offensive operations conducted by the Syrian Interim Government ground troops into Lebanon as a response. Meanwhile, the Israelis are also airstriking the Hezbollah forces as well within the southern regions near to the city of Tyre, as they once again are beginning their operations against Hezbollah and Iranian proxy forces within the region. Not only that, but we are starting to hear that Armenia and Azerbaijan may go into the 4th Nagorno-Karabakh war. If you were not around for the first 3, you certainly will be around for the 4th, as it appears that they are going to start bombing and killing each other again over the same strip of land that they have been fighting for since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, inside the Islamic Republic of Iran, we've also been able to hear statements by Khamenei today over the situation involving the Yemeni Houthis, as well as the major situation in the Middle East as well, with all Iranian proxy forces. Meanwhile, over across the way in East Asia, we've been able to hear that the Japanese have now deployed a anti-ship missile battery into the area of the Ktushu Islands to the most southerly point of Japan, or the Japanese mainland, to deter Chinese aggression, as Chinese naval operations are beginning to intensify in aggressiveness not only against the Republic of China on the island of Taiwan, but also against the state of Japan and their island chain extending down to the island of Taiwan itself. Meanwhile, in military exercises, the People's Republic of China has suffered an embarrassment today as a J-15 strategic fighter has crashed today in an unexpected training incident. The pilot did survive, but the video was rather shocking and appears to show some form of critical failure either on the part of the pilot or the aircraft that resulted in the crash. Meanwhile, we've also been able to get major news from inside of Ukraine, as Ukrainian armed forces have been able to conduct another successful major drone attack today across the entirety of the Russian Federation, causing extensive damage to airfields, refineries, and other key targets that help the Russian Federation to be able to continue their war. As of today, we have continued to hear that the Russian negotiating stance is that they are still looking for an absolute victory prerequisite to a ceasefire, most likely showing that the U.S. delegation will most likely announce within the next several days that Russian-American negotiation efforts to end the war in Ukraine have stalled, and the war will most likely continue. We have also been able to hear that the United Kingdom and France have created a multinational coalition comprised of dozens of nations throughout the European Union that will be moving in to provide peacekeeping forces to the state of Ukraine to the number of 10,000 troops after the conflict may end, whenever that may be, regardless if that is within the framework of the U.S.-led peace negotiations that are currently being conducted right now. On the battlefields of Ukraine, we have been able to see the Ukrainian armed forces have continued to make progress within the cities of Toretsk and Pokrovsk and have been able to repel Russian attacks in Velika and Novosilka. However, it does appear that Russian forces are continuing to make progress within the Sudzha direction, as we have now been able to hear officially that Ukrainian armed forces have been pushed entirely out of the city of Sudzha, with the Chechen fighters now appearing inside the city, letting us clearly know that there can be no Ukrainian forces there, because the Chechens never actually engage in true fighting, or even get close to the Ukrainians for that matter. We have been able to see, however, the Ukrainian forces are still inflicting as high casualties as they possibly can within the Kursk front, although the situation appears to be fleeting, and Ukrainian forces will most likely withdraw back across the border within several days or weeks from this point. There is a major amount of news today. I'm sure many of y'all can tell that, because this is just the general news summary for the night, and there are about 55 individual news segments that we have to cover tonight, making this one of the record-breaking news summaries that we will be having on stream in the channel's history. There has been something going on in quite literally every single corner of the world, from the Middle East to Europe to Asia, that we have to cover today, and I hope that y'all are going to be enjoying this, because I don't believe we'll ever have this kind of a broad or fleshed out news coverage on every single kind of conflict going on in Europe and Asia for quite some time from this point. Or I may be proven wrong and everything just explodes in the next couple of weeks, and then it's like this from here on. But nevertheless, before we even get on into the news, I do want to shout out that tonight is the Sunday fundraiser night, and tonight's fundraiser is for Nova Ukraine. We have a $2.5 thousand goal, and I know that the Leaf Spring Army will be reaching that goal, because the Leaf Spring Army has never missed a single goal in the history of this channel. And so hopefully we'll be able to see that we reach records tonight. And with that, it is time for us to get on into the major news of the night. And that is going to be bringing us on down into the area of the Gulf of Aden and the southern Red Sea, as we have been able to hear that the armed forces of the Republic have been conducting massive armed airstrikes and naval strikes against Yemeni Houthi targets within the area of western Houthi-controlled Yemen. We were able to see that U.S. Air Forces were, of course, being launched from the decks of aircraft carriers, and we've also been able to hear the rumors of the involvement of other aircraft involved in operations with the U.S. Air Force, although we do not have any video or picture evidence to directly corroborate those claims, at least at this point. But we were able to see some of the carrier operations right here. We can see them getting an FA-18 Super Hornet ready for takeoff, and we can see one being launched off of the deck of the Harry S Truman in this clip.
An FA-18, you say? That's a very nice aircraft right there, I must say. Carrier launched of all things, too. Very, very interesting.
These are incredibly impressive aircraft. Of course, not the most amazing and advanced aircraft of the fleet air arm in the present day. That would be the F-35s. But these are still an incredibly potent and, of course, damaging aircraft as far as the Yemeni Houthis are concerned, as Yemeni Houthi anti-air batteries are incredibly limited in number and abilities. And as far as we've been able to see in between the U.S. Houthi conflict, which has begun about a year or a year and a half ago, we have only seen surface-to-air missile battery action from the Yemeni Houthis about once or twice over the course of the entire conflict. Once again, showing us that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is not really able to supply a sufficient number of anti-aircraft ordnance or anti-aircraft missile launchers for the Houthis to be able to mount a successful defense of their airspace. Nevertheless, we do understand that seed operations were being conducted overnight over the past 48 hours as well, as the U.S. Navy was conducting its airstrikes against the Houthis within this area. We were able to hear that U.S. airstrikes were reported only hours ago within the direction of Al-Hodeida, which is a major port along the Yemeni coastline, which we have seen a large amount of Houthi activity being based from in the past. From what we largely assume at this point, it seems as though the large majority of anti-ship operations that have been conducted by the Yemeni Houthis have largely been conducted out of Al-Hodeida. We generally believe that this is the case because Al-Hodeida, being a larger urban area near to the coastline, provides a great deal of buildings and, for the large part, concealment for them to be able to house, store, or hide any kind of munitions or weaponry that could be used in support of Houthi operations and interdicting global trade within the southern area of the Red Sea. We have also been able to see that not only was the city of Al-Hodeida hit by U.S. airstrikes, but we were also able to see that there was some bombing that was occurring in the capital city of Sana'a, as we were able to see the clouds of smoke rising after U.S. airstrikes were able to successfully strike deep into the city itself, once again hitting critical arms and ammunition storages of the Houthis and possibly major control centers and headquarters for Houthi or Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps operations. According to information that we have currently, the U.S. air and naval forces are sustaining a broad and intensive bombing campaign across Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen. As the strikes persist, the Iranian-backed militia issued a statement declaring that this aggression will not pass without a response, and this escalation will be met with escalation. Very scary coming from a group of people that only know how to fire AKs, much less actually operate any kind of advanced weaponry. Should hostilities intensify, the United States may mobilize strategic assets such as strategic bombers, the B-2 Spirit, the B-1 Lancer, or the B-52H Stratofortresses to deliver precision strikes on hardened weapons facilities and key command and control nodes. Notably, B-2 bombers were previously employed in November 2024 to destroy underground fortified weapons storage sites. We have been able to understand that not only are naval air operations being conducted against the Yemeni Houthis, but we've also been able to see that sea-based or surface ship operations have also been conducted as well. We were able to see that some of our Ticonderoga class cruisers were conducting ground-to-ground strikes with their missile cells on board against Houthi targets, although those are unknown which targets were being stricken by the missiles that we were seeing fired in this clip. We were also able to see some additional pictures as well of the impacts of U.S. munitions on some Houthi sites within the western area of Yemen. It appears that they were successful.
Look at how high definition that is, by the way. I didn't comment on that on the short war video, but this is like so much more clear than what we're used to from seeing from the Ukrainian drones. This is wildly clear.
Man, the Yemeni Houthis were caught lacking in 4K Ultra HD.
Yeah, literally 4K.
Moving on from that, we also got to see some more pictures of some Arleigh Burke-class destroyers that were also involved in the strikes today. Unfortunately, I do not know the exact names of these vessels or their identifying numbers, but we were also able to see some of the operations being conducted by FA-18 Hornets as well. These appear to be outfitted for a very light but long duration air interdiction role, as we can see that it appears that they have a significant number of external drop tanks on board, although some of these may also be bombs as well. Due to the color on them, it's really hard to tell if they're drop tanks or any kind of external ordnance that were mounted onto the aircraft, but we can see that these FA-18s are also equipped with AIM-9s on their most external pylons, which is leading us to believe that these aircraft may may be expected to remain airborne for several hours, most likely scanning and protecting the carrier strike group from any kind of a return attack from the Houthis, which will most likely be conducted by a light amount of attack drones or a light amount of older and antiquated anti-ship missiles that the Houthis have at their disposal. We were able to understand that later on in the day, there was an attack that was conducted by the Houthis against the carrier strike group of the Harry S. Truman within the area of the Gulf of Aden. From what we were able to hear, according to U.S. Department of Defense officials, they did state that U.S. warships had intercepted about a dozen Houthi drones targeting the Truman strike group since last night's airstrikes. The drones were taken out well before posing a serious threat. From what we would generally understand with how carrier strike groups engage any kind of incoming anti-ship targets or largely air targets, these drones were most likely wiped out before they even made it close to the carrier strike group, which most likely is operating somewhere almost on the very fringe of the Gulf of Aden and almost entering the Arabian Sea. These drones would have had to transit hundreds of miles at fairly slow speeds, meaning that the carrier strike group, largely not the aircraft carrier itself, but its escorting fleet of Ticonderoga and Arleigh Burke class vessels, were able to detect, intercept, and shoot down most of these drones before they even made it a couple of dozen miles away from the carrier strike group. Also, some of the FA-18s that we saw in the prior pictures that appeared to be outfitted for a long-duration air interdiction mission may have also been involved in shooting down those drones, although the exact play-by-play of how the defense of the carrier strike group went down is currently unknown at this point and is largely subject to a lot of speculation on our ends for the large part. We were also able to hear some additional information as well about more aircraft carrier launches that were being conducted in the middle of the day, and this was actually posted directly by U.S. Central Command, which is currently the largely the leadership in charge of conducting these strikes against the Houthis. You see the FA-18s being launched here from the Harry S. Truman.
Makes you proud to be an American for once, you know, I'm telling you what.
Man, those tax dollars are going to hard work, I'll tell you that.
Every time one of these things takes off, I ask the question, why do we not have free healthcare? And I'll say, this is why.
Man, every single time one of these takes off, man, I can hear a bald eagle screeching in the distance and millions of dollars just going down the drain. But damn it, it's the most glorious going down the drain of tax dollars that's ever been seen. Look at them go. We can actually get a close-up view of some of the munitions that are being used, and if I'm correct, these appear to be glide bombs. You can kind of, actually, Matty, they appear to be JASSM specifically. Let me make sure to go and pull that up. Let's see, let me go take a proper gander at this here. And they don't really appear to be JASSMs, actually. I was going to say that they did seem to be so, but the JASSM is a, well, actually, one second, let me shrink this down, is a fairly different kind of a weapon system. But we can see that there is some form of a protrusion at the top of the munition. You can see a bit of a hump right here that most likely is housing some form of glider wings that will be deployed once it drops off the pylon of the FA-18. Unfortunately, I do not know the exact designation of that weapon, and let me see if I can find something on them really quickly. Let's see here. Let me make sure. Let's take a look at this. Yeah, well, it's kind of close, but not exactly. I was about to say it might be some sort of a small diameter bomb, like a GBU-39, perhaps. But once again, it doesn't really look like we're exactly on the dot right there with that. It looks like it would be fairly close to being a GBU-39, but not exactly. And let me see if I can show you all a picture here of what I'm looking at, so that we all can get an idea of what I'm trying to talk about. You can see here that these are being mounted onto what appears to be an A-10 Warthog due to the shape of the underbelly, and these are incredibly small, the GBU-39s are. So these don't appear to be the same. These appear to be larger in size and really munition ability.
So I see that one of our viewers, Snowy, said, are those LRASMs? And I'm looking at a picture of one right now, and that could be it. It looks like a similar shape, so let's see.
No, these appear to be a little too chunky, and also these appear to have some sort of a black external coating. Wait, hang on. No, these aren't it, because these have a different body shape than these bombs right here. These are more so perfectly cylindrical, except for the top where it appears that there is some sort of a protrusion that was created, so that way the extendable wings could retract into the body of the bomb. Unfortunately, I don't know what these would be, but they do appear to be fairly significant in size. I would assume maybe somewhere in between 1,000 to 2,000 pounds of explosives on each ordnance. But they are incredibly nice looking, and I would assume based off of the explosive size that we could assume based off of the size of the actual bomb itself, that these things are probably made to wipe out and possibly even harden shelters just through the explosive force of the bomb alone. Sadly, though, I cannot say what bomb this is specifically. Usually we're pretty good with this, but this one is eluding me at the moment. So we'll continue the video, because we can see the FA-18 being launched from the deck.
So let's see, we got another guess at it. Someone said it's either a JSOW or it's a JSOW seems to be the most common prediction.
A joint standoff weapon. That is actually it, dead on the nail right there. That is exactly what we were looking at. Let me go see if I can get another picture of this right here. Yeah, these match the size, has the fin shape, and it also has the protrusion at the top of the cylindrical body to pretty much match. So this is the joint standoff weapon that was being used, and we can also see one being brought up on a weapons elevator of an aircraft carrier in this picture right here. So that is the exact match. So a huge thanks to everyone in the chat for getting that correct, because that is a joint standoff weapon. An incredibly good weapon system, mind you. I don't know why I didn't think of this one. They're fairly cheap as well. They only cost about $719,000 a pop, which a lot of people are like, that doesn't sound that cheap. That is incredibly cheap, I can promise you, compared to most other kinds of bombs, unless we're talking about a dumb bomb. And also, these things are able to carry a wide variety of munitions, largely in the incredibly large, I guess you could say, scale, largely somewhere in between 1,000 to 2,000 pounds. So these things are wonderful, and hopefully we'll be able to see that the Yemeni Houthis we get to see the wonder and splendor of these kinds of weapons up close and personal. But nevertheless, it is an interesting action that the United States Armed Forces is taking at this moment against the Yemeni Houthis, and we most likely will be expecting in the coming days and weeks that this air operation will be continuing. We have been able to hear statements from the Office of the President of the United States, as well as the Secretary of Defense, that the U.S. Armed Forces will continue to conduct armed operations against the Yemeni Houthis until they declare that their hostilities against global shipping, or specifically American shipping through the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea, will come to a cessation, meaning that we largely expect that these kinds of air operations will be continuing for days, if not weeks, at this point. We have also heard that the U.S. Secretary of State has largely rumored to the idea of deploying Marine expeditionary units to the actual Yemeni coastline to deal with the Yemeni Houthis on land, although they have stated that at the moment that doesn't appear to be needed or necessary, but still hinting or alluding to a future idea of using Marine expeditionary units. Nevertheless, a lot of people have been talking about the current U.S. air operations that have been conducted by the United States against the Houthis over the past 48 hours, and whether the Houthis will finally stop attacking commercial shipping within the area, or if they'll just continue on. And it does appear that there are a lot of people with a load of different ideas at the moment about what is actually going to be happening. Some people believe that the Houthis will eventually give in. Others are saying that the Houthis will want to become martyrs, as martyrdom in these kinds of extremist factions is a highly coveted thing. Some others are saying that Iran will join the fight against the United States in support of the Houthis, pretty much sealing a death warrant, and others are unsure and undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it looks like 40% of the audience said the Houthis will eventually give in to the U.S. demands, while 34% said the Houthis will decide to become martyrs instead, and 19% said Iran will join the fight against the United States. And right now, so far, we're really not sure where Iran stands on this issue. Of course, they're issuing statements that the Yemeni Houthis are winning, which is, of course, not in corroboration with reality, but they're saying that nonetheless. But they're also not committing to jumping in the war either. So I doubt the Iranians are jumping in for now, but don't rule it out. So I'm going to say this. The Houthis said directly today in a statement that they're going to voluntarily become martyrs for their cause instead of give in to the U.S. demands. But ultimately, though, when you have these large bombs being dropped right on your head, that might change your mind just a little bit about becoming a martyr. So they might decide to give in and back down. But for now, though, they're going to keep going. But I think after a few days of this really, really bad bombardment by U.S. forces, they will probably decide to change their minds, or they'll be looking for help elsewhere from their buddies around the area, which they might not get. So I'm going to say this. I think they're going to eventually give in, but for now, they're going to hunker down and see how long they can take it. But this is going to probably ramp up because the B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, they will be coming in shortly if they do not back down. Those are very menacing. They drop a lot of ordnance, and that's something you don't want flying over your head. So they know it's going to get worse if they don't back down quick. And this is about time this happens because these forces in Yemen have been terrorizing global shipping for months and months and months. And it's about time they get dealt with. So hopefully they are dealt with quick. But Enforcer, what say you?
The Houthis have been messing with the global shipping for the large part, not only U.S. shipping, for nearly a year and a half at this point. The hostilities began around the same time as the Hamas massacre occurred in Israel on October 7th of 2023, and since then we have seen that the Yemeni Houthis have largely supported the Iranians' larger hostile actions within the Middle East by trying to interdict global shipping passing through the Red Sea into or out of the Suez Canal. Since then, we've been able to see that the prior administration has dealt with the Yemeni Houthis in practically the exact same way that the current administration is dealing with them, by conducting limited airstrikes against Houthi forces on the ground and hoping that that would eventually pretty much beat them into submission and make them give up on their larger objectives of trying to interdict or greatly affect global trade. The issue is that that appears to have not worked so far, to be entirely honest with y'all. We have seen, just once again to lay this out, that the prior administration did almost the exact same thing that the current administration is doing. It just really wasn't played up a lot, and the prior administration really didn't say a lot about it. But as many of y'all will know, having watched this channel for years, we have already seen almost the exact same kinds of actions not only being conducted by the United States against the Houthis, but also by the Royal Air Force against the Houthis as well at different times. And it never really has appeared to completely stop them. I have a feeling that while this air campaign is going to be the largest and most intensive that we've seen so far, the actual impact on making the Houthis submit or largely give in to U.S. demands to stop their aggression or acts of piracy against global shipping will not be heeded. And we will most likely have to see that the Houthis will have to be dealt with directly on the ground itself. Dealing with groups like these is incredibly difficult. The Yemeni Houthis, much like any other group that is supported by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran, is an ununiformed, largely militia-like unit in operation, or as some people would call it, an insurgent force, meaning that they aren't really fully uniformed, they do not have actual military bases, they may have small camps in some places, and some storage facilities that we may be able to find and target, but it's incredibly difficult to completely wipe them out or stop their abilities at attacking global shipping as long as they have a significant presence within the area of Western Yemen. They have had this presence for an incredibly long time, and if we look at the Yemeni civil war and show you all the current map of what Yemen looks like, they control practically the entirety of the populated areas of Western Yemen. And because of this, and because of their massive control of the coastline within the southern Red Sea, they are able to conduct unlimited attacks against any global shipping that they please, as long as their fighters are able to duck and cover when the bombs come in, and once the bombing stops, they're able to pop right back out and continue their attacks against global shipping time and time again. I will be entirely honest with y'all that I do find these efforts by the U.S. Armed Forces and the Office of the President to be commendable in trying to deal with this major threat that is being posed to global shipping and U.S. interests within the region. However, I've always insisted on this channel that simply bombing them is not enough to actually deal with the issue. I do believe that at this point it would be a prudent measure to see that the United States Armed Forces actually engages in ground action in support of the Yemeni government, the legitimate government of Yemen, to deal with the Yemeni Houthis once and for all, and to bring the area under some form of control or legal authority of the Yemeni central government. With this in mind, we would be able to see the abilities for the Yemenis or the Yemeni Houthis to be able to attack global shipping on the western coast of Yemen would be greatly reduced, if not completely non-existent. U.S. peacekeeping forces could remain in the area for several years, once again ensuring that the coastlines are largely anywhere several miles to the coast is well protected, and ensures that they would not be able to set up any kind of anti-ship batteries or any kind of drone launching platforms to be able to once again continue their reign of terror and piracy within the areas of the southern Red Sea. That is really the only way to deal with this permanently, because based off of the current arrangement, and it may work, we may be able to bomb them into submission, where for now, they say that they will not conduct any aggressive actions against U.S. vessels or really any vessels transiting the area. But who's to say that they don't renege on that after a couple of weeks, months, or years, because they will still exist, and once again get right back to trying to attack U.S. and global shipping within the area? There is really no way to guarantee that that wouldn't happen, because they still would exist. And as long as they exist in an actual area of ground that they control, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is able to continue to smuggle them weapons and money to be able to continue to finance their operations, hostilities from the Yemeni Houthis will never truly end. We can bomb them all we want, but it really will only bring a slight pause or cessation to their hostilities until they're able to rearm themselves again, and then the hostilities will resume immediately once more. Just like the Hamas forces do, and just like Hezbollah. They always are able to conduct aggressive actions against the state of Israel until the state of Israel bombs them enough. Then they say that they'll stop, and then about 5 or 10 years later, they begin the hostilities anew. And then we're right back to where we started. And so it would be a lot better to actually deal with them on the ground and make sure that the Yemeni government is able to actually bring control to the western area of Yemen, and that largely would stop most of the hostilities, or all of them, well on into the future, and completely remove Iranian control from such a vital area of global shipping, which is the southern area of the Red Sea. So that would be my take on it. And also, I wanted to add in a couple of little extra things now that we've gotten y'all's opinions on this at the moment. There have been a couple of extra little, I guess you could call them diplomatic developments that have been attached to this that I always find very interesting, and I want to make sure to share them with y'all. First off, American ships, supposedly according to the Yemenis, this is the leader of the Yemeni Houthis, by the way, it looks like a ripoff of Andrew Tate, but he stated that American ships are now banned from transiting the Red Sea, and stated that he will be making sure to enforce that somewhat well. I have a feeling he won't be able to enforce that well, because I have a feeling that there is a joint standoff weapon with his name on it at this point, and they are probably looking for him. I don't know where he is at the moment, but I'm sure that U.S. intelligence does, and we'll probably hear that he goes the way of the ISIS leader here in a couple of days or weeks if this keeps up.
Honestly, the cringiest thing ever. Like, he has the ability to stop ships from going through the Red Sea is insane. And also, Iran came out and made a statement that the Houthis are winning. They're stopping American destruction of the Middle East, and they're stopping the shipping through the Red Sea. It's like they have no ability to stop it. The guy literally just came out and made that up. It's cringy.
He said, the nation of Yemen is definitely victorious. The only path is that of resistance. That which has caused the U.S. and its allies to panic today is the fact that the Muslim nations are standing firmly, and that this resistance will prove to be effective. Well, I doubt that, because those bombs sure are bombing. like they sure are leveling decent areas of Houthi-controlled territory. But if y'all thought that that was the end of the diplomatic developments there, or largely the statements that Iran was making, oh no, y'all haven't heard of the main contender yet. I want to put this one out there, because we always have to remember about our great and loving friends in the Russian Federation. The citizens and nation of the Russian Federation always cares the best about the United States of America. They truly respect America. They love peace. Putin was born on a white dove itself. They always are looking out for America's interests, because they respect the United States of America. And that is why today, Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of the Russian Federation, has demanded that the United States stop its use of force in Yemen and instead enter into a political dialogue with terrorists. That is the direct statement from the Russian foreign minister today, and once again reminding us how big of a friend the Russian Federation is. For about a year and a half now, the Yemeni Houthis have conducted an unmitigated act of terrorism in the southern Red Sea, attacking U.S. shipping within the region, and not only that, global shipping at large, and even at points including Russian vessels in the list of casualties that have been seen within this area. With that in mind, the Russian Federation, instead of applauding the efforts of the United States to deal with terrorist forces in the region and to deal with the stabilizing factors that have truly brought the region into unmitigated chaos, instead of applauding these efforts, they openly state that we should allow these terrorist forces to continue to exist unharmed, unscathed, and then instead simply try and talk to these extremists in the hopes that they will eventually stop their attacks against U.S. and global shipping within this region. Now, if that doesn't show y'all who our friends are, I don't know what would, because the fact that the Russians are coming out to bat in support of terrorist forces within the region ought to be showing fairly clearly that the Russian Federation views these forces as allies in their cause to continue to destabilize the Western world and the realm that the United States operates in at this point, and they continue to try and push forward their own interests at the expense of the United States. These kinds of actions.
Also, you see the little lame attempt there to like try to create a little sarcastic situation. Of course, we know Russia calls Ukraine terrorists. That's what they call them. So they view this as the same situation. That's their propaganda version of it, because the U.S. is telling Russia, go and negotiate with Ukraine, which Russia views as quote unquote terrorists, and end the war. So they're being cheeky by saying the U.S. should go negotiate with the terrorist in Yemen to end that situation as well. So it's just a bunch of game playing. It shows that they're really not wanting to be operating in good faith. They're just saying stuff that pisses off at this point.
They really are. And it's like there's a big difference in between the state of Ukraine, which they claim is a terrorist force, and that of the Yemeni Houthis. The Yemeni Houthis are truly a terrorist force. They conduct acts of terror to try and get their way. They've been doing that for a year and a half down there, and that's why the prior administration also had to deal with them the exact same way the current administration is dealing with them, is because they were attacking global trade. So the Russians, instead of trying to actually show that they care about making any kind of diplomatic progress with the United States on any level, they instead say that we should get into diplomatic dialogue with them. But the most important reason why, it's not that they're trying to pretty much call the kettle black, in a sense. They're more so wanting to actually support the Houthis because the Islamic Republic of Iran is their ally, and the Russian Federation is not a friend of the United States. They are an enemy of the United States full and through, not because the United States wants them to be, but because the Russian Federation views America as being an enemy to their own interests within Eastern Europe and largely around the entirety of the world, including the Middle East as well. And for these reasons, the Russian Federation is always attempting to support and foster actions that will start to destabilize the U.S. economy or U.S. military presence within the area of the Middle East, just like the actions that the Houthis have been conducting for years. And so they actually would like us to see, would like us to get into some form of diplomatic dialogue with the Houthis, but the simple fact of the matter is that the United States does not negotiate with terrorists, and the Yemeni Houthis are not the legitimate government of the Republic of Yemen. That would be the Republic of Yemen's government, which still exists and is continuing to fight the Yemeni Houthis within the nation of Yemen. But moving on out of that news and on up into another direction of the Middle East, we have been able to see that there has been another kind of a conflict that has broken out today that's a little bit shocking. We didn't expect this one, but before we get on into that, we do want to once again cover one last topic before we move on from the Houthis. That Houthi forces have stated that they are going to attack U.S. forces soon, and Israel is also on high alert because of this, and a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so it looks like 50% of the audience said yes, the Houthis will launch attacks soon, while 27% said they have no power to project, and 17% said Iran proxies will attack on their behalf. And already the Houthis have launched attacks. Like, believe it or not, they actually launched an attack on our aircraft carrier today using ballistic missiles and also drones. But none of them actually hit the carrier. They were all shot down before they got there. So they have launched an attack. And at first I thought they were lying, because they lie all the time about attacking U.S. vessels. And they always turn out to be false. It's never true. But this time it actually was true. They actually did attack. So they're doing that. And also, they're expecting an attack on Israel by the Houthis or the proxy forces as retaliation for this. So I think that might be the case. I'm actually with the 17%. The Iranian proxies might go a little bit berserk for a moment just to retaliate on behalf of the Houthis. So that's my assumption. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the Houthis are most likely going to retaliate and launch attacks soon, as these groups never go out easily. Hamas was attacking the Israelis until the entirety of the Gaza Strip was actually taken under Israeli occupation and control. So I'd assume that the Yemeni Houthis are most likely going to be doing the exact same thing, and as long as they control any kind of territory or there are any fighters that actually have an open window to be able to launch any kind of limited strikes, they'll most likely be able to continue to do that until the U.S. gets involved on the ground and actually helps the Yemeni government to bring this area back under Yemeni government control. I have a feeling that that would most likely be the case. But moving on from that and on up into the northern area of the Middle East, or as this technically is called, the Near East, interestingly enough, Syria and Lebanon are apparently a part of the Near East, not the Middle East. The Middle East is just Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and everything else down here in the Arabian Peninsula. And then the Far East is Iran and all these other places over here. But beyond that, Moving on up into this area, something a little fresh happened today. Many of y'all will know that the Syrian Interim Government, or the HTS, isn't exactly a great group, and just got done conducting a massacre of around 1,500 people on the western coast of Syria about a week ago. And they largely do appear to be affiliated greatly to a pro-Iranian kind of an affiliation. It seems as though that's largely becoming the case. But something changed today. Something very interesting changed today. So up in northern Lebanon, a couple of Hezbollah soldiers walked across the border, took a couple of guys hostage, these guys being a part of the HTS, which is the Syrian Interim Government, brought them back across the border into Lebanon, and then executed them. And apparently, Syrian officials are now vowing to respond to this attack by Hezbollah. We then saw that HTS forces were racing out of Damascus and towards the Syrian border. You see this right here. And we can also hear their mixtape. Great mixtape, by the way.
Oh, listen to that.
Hi-yo. But we can see them driving on their way to the Syrian-Lebanese border, as it appears that now, not only is the HTS going to be fighting the uprising that's still going on in Syria, which is pretty much the Civil War 2.0, they're now going to be fighting Hezbollah at the same time. So now, the pro-Iranian aligned Gilani regime, under the HTS, or the Syrian Interim Government, is now going to be fighting the pro-Iranian aligned Hezbollah forces inside of Lebanon. So if you ever thought that the region would ever make sense, think again, because now the pro-Iranians are killing the pro-Iranians. This kind of thing happens from time to time, I suppose. But moving on from that, although I gotta be honest with y'all, this has actually never happened so far in the entire time that we've been covering news, so this is a little bit new for the channel. We then got to see that Syrian Interim Government forces were then firing rocket barrages into Lebanon at Hezbollah, so they are actually taking, at this point, direct armed action against Hezbollah forces.
They're letting them have it. Where'd they get all these missiles from?
All places. I don't even know. It's like, technically
Damn.
all these were supposed to be destroyed by the Israelis, but apparently they still got some lying around.
I think they might be overextending themselves a little bit here, because they're launching a hell of a lot of missiles they don't seem to really have at the people here, which they just decided to start fighting with over some killed soldiers. Kind of crazy.
It is a little crazy. And we can also see here a clip from the Baalbek Valley in Lebanon, or the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, where these rocket impacts were being made. Oh, let me turn this up.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
We see them driving down the road, and they're recording. Oh, you see everyone trying to get out of the area after the rocket barrages started. Now, here's the fun thing. While Hezbollah is now getting ganked by the Syrian Interim Government, which is just the most unexpected move that we've ever seen. I'll be honest with y'all, the Syrian Interim Government is full of tricks and surprises. Like, one, we never expected them to go full Al-Qaeda on the region. That was honestly kind of a little bit of an unexpected thing. We didn't also expect them to conduct a massacre against an uprising within western Syria. That was a little new. Now they got a couple of the guys massacred by Hezbollah, which is just completely out of left field, and now they're actually attacking Hezbollah in return. And on top of that, now the Israelis are bombing Hezbollah within the southern area of the country, as we've now been able to hear that Israeli air defense forces have been placed on high alert over the concerns that the Houthis are going to be attacking them, and at the meantime, there have been airstrikes near Tyre at this moment, as the Israelis are once again ramping up their operations against against Hezbollah, which is within southern Lebanon. So let me give you all a lay of the land right now of what the Middle East is looking like. So Iran and Israel are technically still involved in an official-unofficial proxy war directly against each other. The Iranians are supporting Hezbollah and Hamas, as well as the Houthis. The Houthis are at war with the United States right now, as well as Israel and Saudi Arabia and the Yemeni government. Israel is currently at war with the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Syrian Interim Government. The Syrian Interim Government is at war with Hezbollah and kind of technically Iran at this point, as well as the uprising that's now occurring inside of Syria, and Hezbollah is at war with literally everybody around them, the Syrians and the Israelis included, as well as Jordan in a limited extent, although they really don't do much to them. And then Hamas is also just kind of like, they're kind of dead. They're like they're like kind of on like a life support system at this point, and the Iranians are trying to like spoon feed them some nourishment to get them back up and running, but they're kind of out of the game at this point. And what's even funnier is that when you look at this in a microcosm of just Hezbollah, or really Lebanon, Syria, and Israel, Israel's at war with Lebanon and Syria, Syria's at war with Lebanon and Israel, and Israel's at war, well, Lebanon is at war with Syria and Israel all at the same time. So no one in this conflict right now in this area are allies. Literally everyone's fighting everyone else in between the three. So it is one of the most confusing kinds of situations that we've seen so far. And I would have to be honest with you all, I think that this is going to end up becoming a little bit hairy here in the future, because we're also hearing that the Iranians are vowing that they might get militarily involved in the future in one of these conflicts in some way, shape, or form to try and protect their proxy forces from complete annihilation in any direction. So with all this in mind, Syria has begun bombing Hezbollah sites in Lebanon after a couple of soldiers got massacred. And a lot of people are wondering, will war ensue? And it appears that everyone is of the belief that a fresh new war will begin. Fresh war. Some people are saying that's likely so, but only time will tell. And others are saying that it's just limited skirmishes for now, nothing to be afraid of. And Matthew, what are people really thinking about this? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So, in response to the couple of soldiers getting killed by the Syria, or actually the Lebanese Hezbollah forces actually took out the Syrian soldiers, a fresh new war might begin. So, about 54% said a fresh new war will begin, and 21% said it's just limited skirmishes, and 17% said likely so, but only time's going to tell. And on this one, honestly, it does not seem like a limited skirmish to me. The Syrian government is going all out in responding to the Hezbollah forces and what they did to their soldiers. And it looks like they are either overreacting or they've been having an itch to go after the Hezbollah forces. The only piece of good news out of this is it sounds like Lebanon is coordinating with the Syrian government to take Hezbollah out, because nobody likes Hezbollah. And while we may have problems with other factions, Hezbollah is by far one of the worst because it's Iran-backed. So it sounds like there is some coordination there, which is a good sign. But I think ultimately, though, Hezbollah, like the rest of them, do not like to step down. They're like the Houthis. They like to go all the way to the very end, and they probably want to start a fresh war to actually take them down now that they've started this massive escalation by firing rockets right into Lebanon. So I'm actually with the 54%. I think it's going to get out of control. But Enforcer, what say you?
Also, J. Bagwell, you're right. I forgot about the Russians and the Turks in the Middle East. But to get to this poll, I do believe that a fresh war is going to be beginning in between the Syrian Interim Government and Hezbollah, because I think that there's a bit of an ideological rift that's actually starting to form in between the two. And also due to the massacre that happened today on the 3 HTS soldiers, I have a feeling that was enough to spark a conflict in between the two. So, and also on top of that, the Israelis are going to be invading southern Lebanon and southern Syria anytime now, again. So we'll mostly be seeing that there will be a nice, good conflict brewing in the area. But, you know something, Matthew, I just realized is that this area is probably one of the most messed up that it's been for a while at this point. So let's go through it country by country and explain what's going on. So Turkey is currently invading Syria, fighting the Kurds in northeastern Syria, and also kind of pushing against the HDS within western Syria at this point. They also kind of support Azerbaijan in the Nagorno-Karabakh wars, although not really, because the Russians are really more so behind that. Right now, the Russians are also in Syria as well, and they still have about 1,000 soldiers trapped inside the country that have not been able to leave. Armenia and Azerbaijan are about to get to the point of killing each other again, so they're about to go to war. We're going to cover that in a second. The Syrians are technically at war now with Turkey. The Kurds also are at war with Turkey, which is a part of Syria, Lebanon, and Israel, and also are in conflict a little bit with some terrorist cells inside of Iraq. Iraq is a shit show, and the Iraqi government has been trying to deal with terrorist forces throughout the entirety of the country and trying to knock out their cells, but they never really have been able to due to some inefficacy of the government within some of the more fringe regions. And we've also been able to see that the Kurds in northern Iraq are dealing with their own thing. We also understand that the Turks are still dealing with the PKK to a limited extent, although not really a lot. There's been a treaty that was signed in between the two. The Kingdom of Jordan has been having to defend itself and Israel against Iranian attacks launched at Israel. Israel is currently at war with Hezbollah, Hamas, the Syrians, and the Houthis, and also Iran at the same time. Kuwait is just chilling. Saudi Arabia is having unfriendly relations with the Iranians, almost to the point of going to blows at times. They are fighting the Yemeni Houthis. And that's about it for them. The Yemeni government is currently fighting the Houthis. The Houthis are fighting the United States, Israel, and the Houthi government at the same time, and they're being supported by Iran. Oman is just chilling. Qatar is harboring Hamas leaders whenever they can. Bahrain is almost doing the same, but not really. The UAE is just kind of chilling as well. And then Iran right now is at war with Israel, kind of the United States in an unofficial way, the Yemeni government, Syria, and then also Afghanistan and Pakistan in border skirmishes. So that's the entire lay of the land right now in the Middle East with what's going on for everyone everywhere. Yeah. So I think you can get the idea.
It's just chaos everywhere, honestly. Just chaos all over the map. But real quick, Enforcer, I don't mean to interrupt, but we have a 500 Canadian that was just thrown in by Nicholas Condor and brought us up to nearly $2,000 raised of the $2,500 goal. I had to shout that out real quick. It's a humongous donation, by the way, and huge thanks to everybody else for donating. But go right ahead, Enforcer. What were you going to say?
That is absolutely crazy. Huge shout out, Nicholas Condor. Sadly, I didn't see it, but I went back and looked at it, and a huge shout out to you because we are up to $2,000 raised on the fundraiser at this point. An absolutely massive fundraiser coming at a massive point for the Middle East because the entire region is pretty much at war at this point in one way or another, and it is an absolute mess, to be entirely honest with you all. Hopefully we'll be able to see some stability come back into play. Honestly, if we deal with the Iranians, stability is almost ensured to return at this point, but that counts on us dealing with the Iranians, and so far I haven't seen any clear action that we're moving towards that yet. But moving on.
I think, honestly, I think Iran wants to lay low until they develop their nuclear weapon because they don't want to draw too much attention to their country. Because if they do that, they might basically accelerate a U.S. response to their nuclear program, which they're kind of hoping and praying doesn't happen at this point. But I think it's coming anyway. I think the U.S. is doing this attack on the Houthis in Yemen to sort of send an indirect message to Iran that we are willing to go in and basically do air campaigns of a very large magnitude and that Iran could be next. It's basically like a demonstration of our product, which is a tremendously large military. So whether or not it deters Iran, I don't think it's going to deter Iran from developing a nuke. I think they're dead set on that at this point, but it may deter them from taking any military actions in the meantime.
I think it may. Hopefully, we'll see that the U.S. still takes military action against them, because we still need to denuclearize them, because they are still working towards a nuclear weapon. But, moving on from that, because we still have a massive amount of news to cover, we have only covered this area of the Middle East, and we still have everything in Europe and East Asia to cover, so I want to make sure that we can keep on rolling this thing along. We are able to hear that apparently the fourth Nagorno-Karabakh war is about to begin. We know that it's a fan favorite, the Nagorno-Karabakh wars. Everyone loves them. You had the first one in the 90s, you had the second one in 2020, you had the third one in 2023, and now we're going to have the fourth one here in 2025. Yippee! It's a great thing. It's over this one little region in Azerbaijan called Nagorno-Karabakh, and it's filled with ethnic Armenians, but it is controlled by Azerbaijan. This was the thing that happened during the Soviet Union, and it was never really addressed because, you know, it didn't matter, it was the Soviet Union. But once the two countries split, Azerbaijan, which is a majority Islamic country, has largely tried to impose Islamic laws or customs onto the Nagorno-Karabakh people, or the Armenians living within Nagorno-Karabakh. Armenia has taken great insult to this, and in the first Nagorno-Karabakh war, Armenia actually won, which they imposed a treaty onto the Azerbaijanis, claiming that Nagorno-Karabakh was a semi-autonomous region of Azerbaijan and would be able to self-govern themselves to a limited extent, although they would be a part of Azerbaijan still. Fast forward to 2020, the second Nagorno-Karabakh war begins. In that war, the Azerbaijanis actually won and then completely stripped Nagorno-Karabakh of being a semi-autonomous region. The third Nagorno-Karabakh war began in 2023 and ended in 2023 in a negotiated ceasefire by the Russians. Now, the fourth one is coming, because we're now hearing that apparently, according to some news outlets within the area, Azerbaijani sources report Armenia is deploying offensive weapons purchased from India along the border with Nakhchivan, Azerbaijan, and also ITV claims Armenia is preparing for war with Azerbaijan. So it does appear that, at least at this point, we may be seeing that there is another Nagorno-Karabakh war. It's going to be the fourth one at this point, and I do not know when we will finally come to an end. There are more Nagorno-Karabakh wars at this point than I think there are Shrek movies, which is saying a lot, because there are a lot of Shrek movies. But nevertheless, we are thinking that they will be going to blows here in the near future, and we are not entirely sure how it's going to go, because the Armenians and the Azerbaijanis are actually somewhat fairly equipped at this point. It's almost a par on par or a parity match between the two. So we do not know how the fourth one's going to go unless the Russians step in and negotiate some sort of a ceasefire agreement. But moving on out of Armenia and Azerbaijan, seeing that there will be a new conflict probably happening there soon, it's now time for us to go over to East Asia really quickly, as we've been able to hear that the Japanese are now deploying anti-ship and anti-air batteries to the Kyushu Islands, which are the southernmost area of the Japanese mainland, to deter Chinese aggression within the region. Apparently, the deployment is expected to begin in March of 2026, within next year, but from what we understand, it's going to be a fairly significant deployment of forces within the islands of Kyushu. We have also been able to see inside of China that there was an interesting training accident that occurred. A Chinese J-15 nose planted into the ground. You can see it right there. And as many of y'all will know, aircraft are not supposed to do that. But let's take a look. That's the sound I make when someone throws into Super Chat. I go, hey! Like he did it too. They are very shocked by this, as many would be. Moving on from that and into the next clips, we then got to see a little bit more info about this whole fighter air, J-15 crash, if you want to call it that. Also, interestingly enough, this was a carrier-based J-15 of the People's Liberation Army Navy. So I'm assuming that this may have been a carrier-borne training exercise from maybe the Type 001 or the Type 002, and the aircraft, I don't know what happened yet, but something went horrifically wrong. But we also got to see the pilot being carted out into the village. There was a pilot.
Wild. He's literally just being carried away after that crash like that, after he ejected. I had said that earlier, and somebody that was a pilot came into the comments and said, yeah, you're right, Enforcer Matt. Your spine compresses a lot when you eject from an aircraft. It's really tough on the body, and it does a number on you. So the fact that guy's just walking away like that is wild.
Man, it's insane, but I honestly don't think he's going to better pastures, because look at that freaking town. It's a slum. They're taking him into Detroit.
Jeez.
Dude, they're going to rob him. Dude, all these people are helping. They're like, here, come here. Yeah, come on into the town. As they're all pulling out their switchblades and getting ready to just shake this guy down for anything he has on him. Like, this.
Man, he landed in the equivalent of China's O block. He's screwed.
Bro, man, can't have shit in China. I crashed my plane into the O block. I got robbed. Like, dude, they're probably out there stripping the copper out of the plane at this point, like the crash. But my God, this is one horrific looking place. Like, you know, they tell y'all that China is modern and advanced. This is what the average Chinese village looks like. It's actually not that far off from looking like a North Korean village, to be entirely honest.
Yeah, it's pretty tough. Like, it's really bad. Also, it's like, where are they even walking this guy to? It's like, surely there's an ambulance coming from somewhere to take them back in. So it's like, where's he just walking to? The oblivion?
Bro, they're taking him to the gulag. Like, they're taking him straight to the gulag. No medical care, no questions asked. Straight to the gulag, no questions. But also, I'm not gonna lie, dude. Like, that village is honestly the most shocking thing in the whole video. It's not even the crash of the J-15. It's just the fact that they brought him into that shithole. Like, dude, if I had crashed and then walked into that, I'd be like, dude, honestly, I think I need to go jump back in the burning jet fuel, because I don't think things are gonna get better from here.
Yeah, I wonder why the Chinese were wanting to scrape this video, or actually these multiple videos, off their social media. I know for number one, they don't want to show a plane crash because that's not good. They're showing their J-15 crashing like that. Or I wonder if it's mainly because of the town looks like crap, and they're like, oh crap, we can't let the world see this town. Like, this is not the image of China we want on the internet.
Man, hold up, man. Let me make sure to go get this right, because this is how the Chinese do it. China, a land of futuristic opportunity, cyberpunk to the extreme, a wonderful place to live. America can't compare. We are truly first world. Huh? No, don't look at that. Don't look at that.
Yeah, so what is this? Where is this, though? It's like, where is this in China?
I don't even know. I actually don't know where this happened. Wait, hang on. Crashed earlier today within Lingao County on Hainan Island. Wait a minute, I know where Hainan Island is. It's this giant island right here. So...
Jeez,
somewhere
that's a
in
rough looking place.
Yeah, dude, that's oh man, that's rough. No bullshit. Man. I'll be honest with you, man. Let's all take a lesson in Mandarin today, okay? We are going to learn how to say "I do not like that." Okay, all right. So, Matthew, how do you think you would say in Mandarin I do not like?
我想冰淇淋，冰淇淋。
Okay, repeat after me. 我
Yeah.
不喜欢. It means I do not like that.
I'm glad to know that.
All right, say it with me, everyone. 不喜欢. We want to say that about that place right there, because I'd be damned if I ever lived in a place like that. That honestly is maybe only a step down from where we're at right now, but that still is a lot rougher, and I would not want to live there, period. But moving on from that, and on out of these clips, because it was just more so of a little interesting thing to look at, you know, just a little gander right there. But moving on from that and out of China, it's now time for us to move on, finally, into Europe, because we still have loads of news to cover in Europe. So if you thought that the news was over, you're greatly mistaken. We are just getting started. The real news starts now, because there was a lot that happened in Europe today, in diplomatic developments, and also in the Ukraine war itself. So, with that, I hope, also, I see so many people making jokes about how that sounds in Mandarin, and I never thought about it that way, but y'all are right, actually. There's a lot of interesting ways that sounds. But anyways, goodness gracious, some people are saying some crazy stuff right there. Goodness. But anyways, beyond that, Matthew, I understand that we actually have raised $2,200 at this point in the fundraiser. We are only $300 short of reaching that fundraiser goal.
Yes.
That is very close. That is incredibly close, as a matter of fact. And we are absolutely steaming it tonight. It's an incredible thing. We are getting very, very close. And I hope that we... Oh, activation just threw 100. Holy moly.
Look at that. Look at that.
Look at that. We're only about $200 away from the fundraiser goal. I want to see if we can make it there without even having to call a general order tonight. So I'm going to give it a couple of minutes. We're going to get through the question segment here. But if it doesn't look like we're about to hit the goal, I'm going to call a general order just to let you all know in advance. So with that, Matthew, take it away. What questions do we have? I understand we have a couple of interesting questions so far.
Yes, but first, before we get to our interesting questions here, we need to get to our top donors of the night. And thus far, we have had that 500 from Nicholas Condor, the largest one of the night, as well as a 100 from The Enforcer, as well as a 100 from A Nightmare Before Christmas, as well as Hal Roser, then a 100, along with Old Warrior and Activista. And then we had a 50 from Skip Tracer 007, as well as Mark Young and Axel K, and also Danny B. And a huge shout, by the way, to our top donors of the night. And thank you for throwing in such a large amount to tonight's fundraiser, which is a very good one, by the way. It's Nova Ukraine, which helps the civilians on the ground inside of Ukraine that are, of course, victims of the war. So huge shout to everybody for that. And also, by the way, I am seeing that we are slowly creeping up there, almost to $100 left on the goal. And it looks like we're getting there pretty damn quick. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to say a massive shout out to everyone who's been supporting the fundraiser so far tonight, because y'all have been doing absolutely amazing. Ukraine, of course, is very appreciative of the support, and Nova Ukraine is an amazing nonprofit to help out. They help out in massive ways, providing medical support, food, and shelter to people who have had to run from the active fighting. It is an incredible thing to know that all of y'all have been helping out tonight, and we just got an anonymous $100 donation, and we are only $48 away from the fundraiser goal. We may actually be able to hit the fundraiser goal tonight without having to call forward a general order. So, surprisingly, actually, we are doing amazingly. And of course, a massive shout out to everyone that we were able to call out, to all the top donors, and also a massive shout out to all of those people that we weren't able to call out. There's been a load of people supporting this fundraiser tonight, and we are massively appreciative and thankful to all of y'all that y'all continue to support American and Western interests around the globe.
Hey, we hit the goal. We hit goal. Jugga, jugga, eagle.
Oh my God.
Let's go. We smashed the goal.
We did.
Look at that.
Holy moly. Like, we did it. We did it. We hit the goal, baby. Man, that's crazy.
Very good. Very good.
Or in the words of Rocky, yo, Adrian, I did it. Like, it's great to see. Absolutely incredible. We've done it, folks. And I got to give a massive shout out to y'all. The support is still flooding in. We've now reached $2,600 at an absolutely amazing fundraiser without a shadow of a doubt. So a big shout out to all of y'all once again. Absolutely incredible. And Matthew, I understand that we have some questions, very interesting ones, real questions, long-lasting questions. So what do we have, Matthew?
All right. And also, by the way, huge shout to Gary Bott, who just threw in 850 as well. And huge shout to Gary for that generous support to the fundraiser, which is now about $107 above the goal. So huge shout out for that. And we are now moving on to our first question of the night. And this one is going to go to Magic Forest, who said, if a missile were to hit a nuke storage site, would there be major radiation from the strike?
If a missile was to hit a nuke storage site, it really wouldn't cause that much radiological damage because nuclear weapons have to go through an arming process to actually be able to explode. And the arming process is really the only way to actually blow up a nuclear weapon. Like, you can actually drop, funnily enough, a nuclear weapon out of a plane and it doesn't have its drogue chute or anything, and it can hit the ground and pretty much disintegrate on impact, but it still will not manage to explode, because for it to explode, you have to be able to have a actual catalyst. So you can hit a nuclear bomb with a conventional explosive, hit it and rupture it, and beyond the radioactive, I guess you could say, dust that would come out of that bomb, or really the radioactive particulates, the radiological damage would be minor. And once again, considering that there would have been no nuclear reaction or nuclear fission that would have occurred at that point, the radiological impact would still be low. You would have to send in radiological cleanup crews to be able to clean that up and, of course, mitigate the damage. But beyond that, it wouldn't be anything so severe that it would be like, say, Chernobyl or Fukushima. So with that in mind, yes, you can really hit it and not really have a lot of damage. So I suppose that would be the answer to the question, is that as long as they're not armed inside of a storage facility, which they shouldn't be, it wouldn't cause any kind of severe or irreparable damage if you were to hit them. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Very interesting question, by the way. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question here goes to Taylor McLean, who says, do you think that Putin is making deals with anyone to keep the Ukraine land for the minerals?
That's an interesting question. I don't really know. I'll be entirely honest with y'all. We have gotten almost no developments coming out of the Witkoff delegation in Moscow right now, and that is leading me to believe that it can't be going well. We keep on hearing that it's going well in the public, but they're not giving any details. And usually there are some details that are leaked to the public to kind of give them an understanding of what's being talked about. But today, I think Witkoff came out, Matthew, and he was like, a lot being talked about, land, power plants, ports, the sea, many things. It's like, well, wait, what does that mean? It's like he's not even telling us what's actually going on.
Yeah, the way I took his statements was he was basically just trying to, I guess you could say, beat around the bush a bit. He was trying to not really commit to any answer. He was leaving it open that there is room for peace talks, which, of course, that's what we're being told by the president's office as well. But we're not seeing any real material concessions by the Russians, and they're not really saying they're making any progress. They keep saying it's looking good, but outside of that, they're not saying that the Russians are willing to give in, that they're willing to agree to a ceasefire or anything. So, and also, by the way, Witkoff just got taken off of being the envoy for the war talks, and now he's just the envoy to Ukraine because Russia insisted that he get taken off the talks. So, the whole thing. Are you sure? I thought it was Witkoff.
I'm pretty. Let me make sure.
I think you may be right. I think it is Kellogg. Yeah, it is Kellogg. So my bad. But overall, though, he's not really committing to either way or another. He's just sort of like going on both sides of the fence at this point, and he's really not saying if there's any progress or not. So I don't think there is any progress. I think it's just like at a stalemate right now.
I think the talks have stalled because remember, I'll just be frank here. The president said that there was going to be some sort of development we would hear about on Monday, and it doesn't appear that there's going to be any development now coming out on Monday. Now they're saying it might be a couple of weeks out. So now it sounds like the talks have stalled, and they're just at some sort of a gridlock, and they really don't want to admit that right now. But here's my thing, folks. Here's my take on that. We strong arm. We literally put the Ukrainians' arm behind their back and twisted it to get them to agree to presenting the Russians with an unconditional ceasefire. Ukraine had no preconditions to get into it that the Russians had to meet. It was just agree to it and the fighting stops right now. Then the Russians come around, and instead of agreeing to a non-preconditional ceasefire like the Ukrainians did, then they want to go, well, let's talk about it. Let's try and iron out some terms here. And then that shows that they're very disingenuous, because if the Russians truly wanted peace and wanted the killing to stop, what better way to stop the killing and bring peace around than to just agree to a non-preconditional ceasefire where you're not having to have anything given to you by the other side to get into the peace talks? You don't have to get anything. You just go straight straight into stopping the fighting. It shows that they really do not want any kind of a peace, and at this point, I have a feeling that the diplomatic negotiations have completely stalled, and the current U.S. administration doesn't want to admit that because that might look badly on them, like they just lied out of their teeth. So they're going to keep it going, so that way, eventually, hopefully, the Russians will just get worn out and will agree to a non-preconditioned ceasefire, because at this point, it's quite obvious that the Russians have no intention on agreeing to anything unless they're pretty much able to win the war before they even get into the ceasefire. So I hope
I don't
that
think we're going to hear anything Monday either. Like today's like Sunday night. Do you really think that tomorrow we're going to hear a sudden change in the situation? I would say definitely not. Probably nothing. And I think I can't even keep their names straight anymore because they're changing positions so much. Witkoff is the one who's currently in charge of the talks between Russia and Ukraine, and Kellogg's the one that was just removed, correct?
Witkoff has been in charge the entire time. Kellogg was a delegate in the delegation and the diplomatic team, but he was removed.
Interesting. So yeah, I think it was Witkoff, if I have it correct. I think he was the one that said he thinks that the war will be resolved within several weeks. But they keep changing the goalposts. At first, it was 24 hours. Then it was maybe a couple of days. Then it was a couple of weeks. And now the guy's saying at this point, which is months in, now he's saying a couple more weeks. So it's just they keep pushing it back because they're not making any progress. And eventually, Putin's going to do something really stupid that causes them to have to publicly acknowledge the fact that they're not making any progress, because I don't think they're going to make any.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I don't think there's going to be any progress made here, and I think that the talks at this point have stalled. It's just that they don't want to admit it, and they're trying to beat a dead horse at this point and trying to get it to do something. Although there's really nothing that can come out of this. Really, in my opinion, I think the U.S. should just back out of the talks. It looks like the Russians are disingenuous with their negotiating efforts right now, and that we should just continue on the war until they're actually genuine about negotiating efforts and actually bringing forward a non-preconditional ceasefire. I think that would be the best thing that we could do right now. But I also saw someone say something in the chat, and it was something interesting. Let's see. Oh, yeah, someone said, I'm still waiting on the JFK files. Yeah, how about that? Like, we're still waiting on those, aren't they? Because I remember hearing, not to get into anything domestically political, but there was a guarantee that was made that the JFK assassination files were going to be published to the public, completely uncensored, which I would honestly highly doubt at this point, because we also heard the same thing was going to happen with the Epstein files, and then they were published in their entirety, but everything was censored in them, so you couldn't even read it. And then we also heard the same thing about the drones in New England, and then none of that came out. And they literally said the same statements that the prior administration said, is that they were either recreational drones or approved flights, which doesn't tell us anything. So a little bit interesting with that. Like, honestly, there's statements that are made that aren't really upheld. And I'm sure, like, I'll be honest with y'all, I know what's going to happen because this has been done like 3 times now. Mr. President, didn't you say that there would be some sort of developments by Monday? Well, it's Tuesday now. What happened? Well, obviously, I was only joking about Monday. I said Monday because that's when people go back to work, and I just thought it'd be kind of funny. What news organization are you with? You must be stupid, something like that, because we're not going to get any developments coming Monday. Because if we were, the delegation would have said today, we are almost done with this, and we're going to have something big coming out tomorrow. Like, they would have said that, and they're saying nothing right now. So it's showing us that they have definitely stalled, and now they're really embarrassed to say that the thing's completely stalled. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news for the night.
All right. So this question is going to go to Hokey Redneck, who said, do you think that the B-2s are on the way to the Middle East? Because it takes almost a day to get there.
I'm not really sure if the B-2s are on their way to the Middle East. Usually they don't like to publicize a lot of information about where the B-2s are ever, so we wouldn't really know for sure. They may be holding them back. They may actually be moving more conventional Air Force assets into the area, or they may be planning, before the B-2s even arrive, to use U.S. Air Force assets that are currently deployed in Saudi Arabia currently. That may also be a move that the U.S. Armed Forces would conduct before the B-2s arrive, but we're not entirely sure. B-2s are usually, they usually just arrive out of the blue. Like, it's honestly a surprise when they're used, and it's really kept under wraps. Really, honestly, it's kept under wraps if any kind of a strategic bomber is ever used anywhere in the world. We only hear about that as soon as it happens. So I can't really tell you if they will be there by tomorrow, or within the next 24 hours, because they may be holding them back for days, if not weeks, so that way they can kind of create a escalatory step ladder instead of going straight to the top with a B2 pretty much on the next day. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least from what I understand currently. And with that, we are on to, well, actually, before we move on, I've seen some people asking about the tornadoes in our area, and there was actually a decent amount of them that made landfall here in Alabama. We didn't really see a lot of damage personally, but we did hear that 3 people died in Alabama overnight from the tornadoes. Very unfortunate to hear. But luckily, our area wasn't hit that badly. There was a tornado that went through the town of Calera and apparently hit a trailer park pretty badly and damaged a Walmart. Matthew actually went down there today. He said that it didn't really appear that there was any damage that he could physically see. So I'm not really sure where that damage actually occurred, but the tornado entered Calera, went up Interstate 65 from what they said, and then turned right, and then traveled pretty much right in between this town right here, which is called Columbiana, and Chelsea, and pretty much went right through the middle, threading the needle, and heading on up towards the area of Talladega, which is over here. A lot of y'all may know Talladega because of the Talladega Speedway right up there, which I think is at least American famous, maybe world famous, not really sure. But still, that's kind of what happened with the tornado that was around us last night. We were really, honestly, everyone was really lucky because beyond it hitting Calera, it actually threaded the needle pretty much in between all of the populated areas. Beyond that, missing Columbiana, just passing right through Chelsea, well, right past Chelsea and Harpersville and so on. So nobody really got directly hit by it. So really lucky with that. And of course, we didn't get hit by it either. So we were very.
We did
lucky.
get the tornado warning though. Like we were getting the buzzing on the phone. I was like, oh crap! Like which way is it coming? At first, they made it sound like it was coming straight for us. At first, they're like, oh, it's coming up like some area where we're at, and then we're like, whoa, it's like it's coming this way. And we got the buzzing on the phone. We're like, oh crap, it's coming straight for us. But luckily, though, it didn't come straight for us. It ended up going sort of back toward Talladega. But if you've seen the pictures, though, a school got really messed up. It threw a school bus into the school. It was just bad. Like it was really, really bad over there. But it missed our area pretty much completely.
Yeah, it was a huge blessing because in our life we've had, this is now the 4th tornado that's come close enough to get an actual tornado warning that it's pretty much on top of you, go seek shelter. It wasn't on top of us, it was at least 6 or 7 miles away, which is honestly pretty far away compared to others, because we've had, I think, at least 2 tornadoes come within about a mile of us. You could actually hear them outside, and one of them was an EF3, so it was a little bit of a sizable one. But beyond that, we were very lucky. We, of course, had to cancel the show last night for a myriad of reasons. One, we didn't know if the tornado was going to hit us. We were pretty sure that there was going to be a tornado, and we were right. But we didn't know if it was going to hit us or not. And also, another thing that we weren't really sure about is in that kind of extreme weather, would the internet and the power stay on? Because we're in Enforcer Studio 2.0, so the internet and the power is a lot more consistent and reliable here. But the question was, how consistent and reliable would that be? And it turns out that it was actually apparently fairly consistent and reliable. We didn't know that, and our area really didn't get hit that badly at all. So we just, came back, immediately started getting back to trying to work on some things, and then went to bed because we were exhausted, because all day long we were having to deal with that. It was like a whole 6-hour thing, and we were exhausted by the end of it. We kind of been exhausted a little bit today, but that was kind of the rundown of what happened, just in case if any of y'all were really wondering what was up with that. Also, someone said, Max Bank said, you guys have bunkers to hide? No. Enforcer Studio 2.0 it's not like a big place. It's on the fairly smaller side, and it doesn't have a storm shelter built in, or a basement for that matter. As far as Enforcer Studio 2.0 is concerned, probably an EF1 could hit it and it would get wiped out. Then the other place that we went, it doesn't have a storm shelter either, and to be entirely honest, the build quality isn't that great on it either. So the best we could do is just get really, really deep down into the building, into the furthest area that we could, and just hope that nothing hit us directly. So that's kind of how we have to work it. And also, not really a lot of houses in Alabama have basements. So you're pretty much just on ground floor level and praying and hoping that it just doesn't blow you away if it hits you directly. So I hope that kind of addresses some of that for y'all, just in case y'all are curious about that. Let's see. And also, let's see. let's see. So some people are joking around about the tornadoes. Tornadoes suck. Tornadoes are terrible. They're nothing but stress-inducing, especially with the ones that were forming in this storm. There were loads of EF4s and EF5s that were hitting the ground everywhere throughout the areas surrounding Alabama, and I think there was some up in northern Alabama too, and up in Tennessee. And it's a nightmare when those things come around because it is quite truly gambling for the large part. You just kind of gamble that they're not going to hit you directly. If an EF5 hits you directly, the chances are there really is no way to survive that unless if you're underground in a storm shelter. So if it hits you, you're dead. So you're just kind of gambling that it doesn't really hit you directly, and it just kind of, it goes in the middle of nowhere or it hits someone else. Anyways, with that, I hope y'all enjoyed a little bit of our anecdotes about the severe weather that came through Alabama last night, because it was certainly a thing that happened, and it was one that I hope doesn't happen often. But anyways, moving on from that and out of the question segment, it's time for us to move on into the rest of the news for the night, and we have a pretty decent amount. Moving on into WAPs first, to carry on with some news that we were covering a few days ago, we were able to see the refinery was still burning.
Oh boy, the same tank?
Actually, this is a different one.
Oh wow, spread.
It is spread indeed.
I think those hoses are doing a great job.
Man, they're doing wonderful work. And also, we got to see that the fire was spreading here as well.
I heard that the Russian fuel supply is going to possibly be cut down by about 50% because of the situation at two ops. Is that true?
Probably not 50%. Because once again, this is just a small, this isn't a small, this is a sizable fuel and oil storage facility in Tuops down here, but it's not, 50% of Russia's supply. So there would be others that could be sourced from, but as far as their external shipping of oil or fuel, that probably might cut it down 50% because it's really only this port and the port of Rostov-on-Don that are able to supply fuel to the larger open market. Well, really, it's just Ust-Luga in Tuops. Rostov-on-Don really only has a fueling node, and I think it's around, where is it? It ought to be down, yeah, it ought to be down here at Azov. So this is their fueling node right there. Which isn't an oil or fuel transport hub. So it really is just Ust-Luga and Tuops. And I think if we were to say which one is going to be more significant, it certainly would be Ust-Luga. So this might cut it down by maybe 30% for external exports. But as far as their actual fuel, it's like a marginal hit for the large part, maybe about a percentage or so, something like that.
Well, maybe hopefully it'll actually knock out a lot of the military fuel supply, because I read an article today that they estimate that for the military it'll be somewhere in the 45 to 50% range. It'll be reduced by, not permanently though, just temporarily. So maybe it'll dent the military a bit.
Possibly so. Meanwhile, we got to see that in the incoming drone attack tonight, some Russian aircraft were landing for the Sea Hills. You can hear the drone coming in. And we were able to hear that Russian aviation squadrons were taking off and evacuating everywhere as those little lawnmowers were coming in to hit their targets. Meanwhile, the Volgograd refinery, surprise, surprise, got hit again. And it appears that there was a strike on the fuel storage and distribution center on the side of the refinery, so we can actually show you all that down here. This is the distribution center, which looks like crap. It looks terrible. I don't know if that's coal dust or what that's over all this, which it shouldn't be because it's an oil facility, but my God, is that place charred.
It's horrid looking. They need to clean it up a bit.
Dude, it's terrible. But beyond that, it got hit again. Surprise, surprise. So, nothing new there. They hit that every other 2 weeks at this point. But moving on from that now to Volgograd and on up into Moscow, we were able to hear, as far as the Russians go in the diplomatic realm, that they are once again seeking guarantees that NATO countries will exclude Ukraine from membership and Ukraine will remain neutral in any peace deal, according to the Russian Deputy Minister Alexander Grushko says. And that was cited by Reuters. So once again, it appears appears that the Russian Federation is trying to be pretty dead set on achieving their terms before a ceasefire is even put into effect, to then negotiate what the terms would actually be. Meanwhile, the British appear to be moving forward with security guarantees, whether the Russians want them or not, or whether America wants them or not. The Western coalition has settled on ceasefire terms and a peacekeeping mission for Ukraine. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom convened 29 global leaders virtually to plan a multinational force. A 10,000 plus troop contingent, spearheaded by the UK and France, will deter Russia's next invasion. Supported by 35 nations with weapons, logistics, and intelligence, the mission takes shape as military heads meet in London this week. The Prime Minister pressed Putin to halt attacks and negotiate peace now. It does appear that at the exact same time, the French are taking some more concerted efforts right now on seeing about where they can go with the future of Europe, or largely the uninvolvement of the United States from European affairs. But before we get into that, some U.S. officials said that Ukraine can give up land in exchange for security guarantees. And some people have been putting in their thoughts, and it seems like a lot of people are really against that. So Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So about 59% said that is not a good deal for Ukraine, while 19% said that would be acceptable for Ukraine, and 15% said Russia wouldn't agree to it, so it's a non-starter. And this is something right here that's a bit controversial because, once again, the Budapest Memorandum was a security guarantee that some people argue was not honored by the United States. And it's kind of debatable because, once again, the U.S. has sent a lot of aid to Ukraine to help them fight the war, but now they're kind of waffling on it and pretending like the Budapest Memorandum never existed. And in fact, it was removed from several references where you can basically not find it on official government pages. So that security guarantee seems to not mean very much, at least according to what we're seeing. But of course, they're saying now, the U.S. officials are saying that if Ukraine gives up some of their land to Russia, then maybe they can get a new security guarantee. And that's just a proposal. That's not like a concrete offer right now. But I would say that probably wouldn't be something that Ukraine would find to be a good deal. And Russia probably wouldn't want that either because Russia wants to be able to reinvade. They don't want the U.S. to come in and do something to them in case they came back. So I'm actually with the 60%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm with the 60% as well. That's not necessarily a good plan for Ukraine or a good idea. Giving up land in exchange for security guarantees seems to be a little bit counterintuitive because for anyone to give you security guarantees, you have to compromise your security to get a security guarantee. That doesn't really seem to make that much sense to me. Also, another thing is that the United States of America has made it fairly clear that they don't want to be the guarantor of any kind of security guarantee in the future. So the Ukrainians are giving up land to the United States. So the United States is satisfied with not even doing the security guarantees anyways, and it's still handed over to the British and the French, which said that they would do it outside of a U.S. arranged peace or not. So I don't really know what the point of that would be. So I would largely say that that's not exactly a good plan or a good idea for the Ukrainians, in my honest opinion. But moving on from that and from that poll and into France, we were able to hear that the French are now preparing for mobilization, as we've been able to hear that the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, has said that they will announce plans to mobilize civilians. And we've also been able to hear some additional news today that the French will be trying to find some way for more Mirage 2000s to be provided from third-party countries outside of France, but once again to the Ukrainian Air Force for them to operate however they please. A fairly interesting development. We have also been able to hear inside of Ukraine of a decent amount of development. It's actually quite a large amount over most front lines. We were able to see the air defense report overnight. The Russians attacked Ukraine with 90 drones. 47 of them were shot down, and 33 were intercepted by electronic warfare measures, meaning that there was a very high interception rate last night of about 80%, 80 to 90% of all incoming drones. Meanwhile, moving on into Kursk, we were able to see that the Russian Federation is taking a very large amount of ground, and it does appear that the Ukrainians at this point are in the process of withdrawal. We are assuming that this withdrawal will most likely take maybe a few more days or maybe a few more weeks, depending on how the Ukrainians are pacing this right now, but it does appear that the Kursk operation is finally coming to an end. We were able to see that Russians were getting hit by FPV drones in the middle of the day today, as the Ukrainians are still making sure to cover their retreat or withdrawal from Kursk, either way you want to put it. And we got to see that this house literally got razed.
I think it was a retreat because they didn't run.
Matthew, I think it was a withdrawal because they did it really calmly and really badass-like. So it must be a withdrawal, not a retreat. But moving on from that and into Sudzha, we also got to see the Russians are in Sudzha and they're messing with people in wheelbarrows. I don't know what's up with this, but here's another one. Ready?
What the hell?
Are we going to shoot? He's going to shoot. Are we? I don't know what's going on
What the
here.
hell's going on here? And this is the Chechens having this guy in a wheelbarrow?
Yeah, this is the Akhmat.
Oh, gosh.
We can only assume that bad things will happen after this clip ends, which is very unfortunate. But once again, that's what happens when the Russians return. They claimed that the Ukrainians were conducting crimes against these people, but I feel like putting a handicapped guy in literally a wheelbarrow and then strapping an AK to him is probably a little bit more of a crime than whatever the Ukrainians were doing there, which wasn't really that bad. But moving on from that and out of Kursk, it's now time for us to get on into our location unknowns, where we got to see this Ukrainian MiG-29 dropping GBU-39 small diameter bombs and doing a barrel roll at the same time. It was pretty cool. Take a look at this. You see them dropping the GBU-39s and then doing a little barrel roll. And you actually see the impacts of GBU-39s in another clip. It wasn't the same one, but still pretty impressive. Moving on from that and on into our next clip, we also got to see the Russian casualty report for the day. And oh my goodness!
Oh, man, they got 0 Bobcats again. It's stuck at the lucky 777. I think they want to keep that number, but tell us more,
Man, the lucky 777. Don't call it a Boeing, though, because it might crash. But beyond that, Miss DC Keeper of the Records did state that 78 artillery pieces is the second highest daily loss of the war, and 180 drones ranks as the 9th highest loss of the war as well. And the losses were actually pretty decent today. 1,400 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed in the past 24 hours, along with 20 APCs, 113 supply trucks, 10 main battle tanks, 78 artillery pieces, 180 drones, which is pretty significant, 2 MLRSs, and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. It was an incredibly good day for the Ukrainian armed forces, and it does appear that on most fronts, they are still continuing to push the Russian Federation back inside of Ukraine, and they are still holding the lines in other places. But moving on down into Chasiv Yar, we got to see some Russian tanks being destroyed by the Phoenix unit today. Take a gander at this. We can see here the Russian tank making its way through a valley as the FPV drone lines itself up for a nice clean hit. And we can see it hitting. And sadly, we didn't get a damage assessment there, but we can see them dropping a bomblet onto another Russian tank that appears to have a shed built on top of it. We can now see that they're blowing away the shed and also trying to hit it a little bit more as well. We can now see a Russian tank apparently having some sort of an ammo cook-off in the middle of the street. It's already been hit, and it appears that the Ukrainians are now giving it a good old double tap.
Double tap them. Walk with your boys.
Hit them with a double tap. But moving on from that and into the next clip, we also got to see the Phoenix unit hitting infantry as well and key positions of the Russians in this area. I gotta tell you, man, the drones are just rough, man. Like honestly, we never see infantry firefights hardly at all anymore. It's pretty much just nothing but drone warfare.
Yeah, it seems to be a lot more effective actually than the other way. The other way is pretty inefficient, and also when you have recruits that aren't trained very well, and they don't know how to really fire a gun and aim it well, the drones is probably a easier way to get it done.
Man, get her done. How we can see Russians cooking. As they say, anyone can cook, but only the Russians can cook great. They cook great.
Oh.
Oh my. But moving on moving on from that clip and down towards Touretsk, we also get to see the 12th Special Operations Brigade of the Azov hitting some Russian supply lines down here. And we see them.
Everybody got very riled up in the chat. There was a guy that came in and said, "Where is the Ukrainian casualties? I don't see them on the chart." Well, buddy, that was a Russian casualties chart. That was not a Ukrainian casualty chart, and we don't show that. We show the Russian casualties.
We don't show a Ukrainian casualty report because the Russian Ministry of Defense comes out in a single day and says, we killed 5 guerrillan Ukrainians, knocked out 30 main battle tanks, and also destroyed Zelenskyy himself. And so there is no accurate reporting on their casualties. Also, then the president of the United States might say something like, thousands of Ukrainians are trapped, and like there's no one trapped anywhere. So, it's like, what the hell was that, though, dude? Did you see that?
What was it? Let me see again.
So over here on the right side of the screen, what the hell was that?
Oh my God. Was that a guy?
I don't know. I don't know what that was. It's like an orb. I don't know what that was.
I don't know what the hell that was. What was that, like a space probe or something like that running across the screen? Honestly, that's not a guy. That's something else.
That's like, dude, the orb. Like it's the orb
It's
from
the
Las
Mosul
Vegas.
orb.
Man, it's about to start speaking. Like something like that. But we can see them just slamming Russians all over the place.
Someone said it's a flying helmet. I mean, it was flying very, very straight, like it was like being propelled or something. It didn't act like it was just thrown.
Man, that was flying so straight you would think it was a chunkla. Like it's honestly like that thing had some laser-like accuracy on it if it was a helmet.
Do you see that guy just fall over like that?
Yeah, and then now they're falling over for real like that.
That guy fell over like he was a prop in the movie.
And when you see them here just continuing to slam them. I mean, they're slamming them good, I tell you. We see them trying to target some sort of a Russian gun that's been set up in this window.
They put a blanket over it.
This would really hide it as the barrel sticks out from the front of the blanket. It's like, nah, I doubt it. But moving on from that clip and into our next one in Turretsk, we also get to see the Ukrainians hitting Russian positions with the 63rd. This is right on the outskirts of the northern side of Turretsk, and we can see them hitting them with cluster rounds. Just a little cluster here and there.
They call this the salt and peppering. They're seasoning the ground to make sure it's extra good.
I remember when the U.S. was going to provide cluster munitions for the first time, and there was a whole bunch of people like, what if a child picks it up and they look at one of the bomblets? And I was like, where in the world are the children on the front lines? Like, they've all been evacuated. It's like, honestly, it's like, it's like maybe that would be a problem after the war, but it's like the Ukrainians are going to be sending up cleanup crews. Like, they're already doing that behind the lines. Like, that was such a goofy argument, man. Like, think of the children. It's like the children aren't even on the front. It's like, honestly, if there are children on the front, I think we need to be asking the question of, why are they there? Like, and what are they doing in the middle of an active front line? But moving on.
And also, it's not like the children are going to be able to run free and run through the rainbow fields and stuff like that, because there's going to be mines out there in addition to the unexploded cluster ordnance. So it's like there's other threats rather than just the cluster. So it's not going to be safe under any circumstance.
Dude, the people who were arguing against that thought that they were like child soldiers or something out there, and they were just going to drop their AK and go, oh, look at that, and like pick up a cluster bomb. Like I don't even know what they were thinking. But moving on from that and into Seladovi, we got to see these Russians driving past some heat.
6 человек сидело там.
Another Ural cooking on the street.
200-300.
That's the end of that clip. Also, Mr. Doofus said, thought cluster munitions were banned. Not if you're cool. No, all jokes aside, if you were cool, I'm just saying this sarcastically, you still use cluster bombs. Like, Europe largely banned them, so most European countries don't use cluster bombs. But the United States actually does, and so does the Russian Federation, and I believe the People's Republic of China, along with a whole other myriad of other countries. It's not really anything that's in the Geneva Convention, say. It's more so something that was agreed by a group of nations that were like, hey, let's work out of the Geneva Convention because we can't make enough ground to ban these as a rule of war, so let's just all agree to ban them ourselves. So most countries in Europe did, but the United States never did. So we are like the cool guys who still use the cluster bombs. I really don't know why, to be entirely honest, because they're slightly more effective in the anti-infantry role, but for the large part, it's a really niche kind of a thing where you're targeting and trying to wipe out dismounted infantry, which in most instances at the beginning of a conventional war, like even against the Russian Federation in the beginning of a conventional war, say in 2022 when their army was still fairly decent, most Russian infantry wouldn't really be dismounted. So it doesn't really pose that much of an effect, really, unless if it's a really niche kind of a thing where it's just nothing but dismounted infantry. But yeah, anyways, we still use them. So it kind of depends from country to country. If you're in the United States, they're not banned, so we just provide them to the Ukrainians en masse. But if it's from anyone else, they usually provide unitary warhead munitions, meaning, just literal high explosive, and that's it. But moving on from that and a little bit down south into Kurakove, we already got to see the Russians have gotten busy looting. song. We also get to hear some polka music playing.
That was honestly a fantastic music selection for this.
And there they go with the fridge. You know the Russians always got to be looting.
That why do they even want it? Are you sure it's a fridge? It looks like a washing machine.
That's a washing
They're trying to get the washing machines again. They're back to stealing those.
They were back to stealing washing machines.
Oh
man.
my god, the Maytag man. The Maytag man's gonna be furious.
Dude, the Russians show up. You open up the door. Yes. Hello, I am the Maytag repairman. I'm here to repair your Maytag. Why do you have to take it? Shut up. Take it, boys. Like, and then they just go and steal it. I don't know. But moving on, out of Kurakove and down towards Velika Novosilka, we did get to see the Ukrainians are still giving the Russians hell at Velika Novosilka, and it doesn't really appear that the Russians are making that much progress.
Home Depot delivery. Yeah, free delivery and takeaway. The takeaway is the only part that's actually being fulfilled, though.
Man, they deliver knuckle sandwich and they take away your washing machine. Like, it's like, it's a win-win for the Russians or lose-lose for you, please.
We will come to our house and take washing machine. Well, what's in it for us? Said the Russian civilian. We take a washing machine.
Just like, it's like that meme where it's like, trade offer. You get nothing. I get washing machine.
Man, they're doing the same thing to the Russian civilians are trying to do to the whole country of Ukraine.
Yeah, give me that.
What do I get in return? Nothing. Just give me.
Man, honestly though, man, I can already hear this, man. Well, hell, the veterans deserve it. Like, you know, there's some Russian out there, dude, making that argument right now.
Man, I'll tell you what. They went from like honestly, the washing machine is probably like their yearly salary and like monetary value at this point is they're making like potatoes for salary. But it's like if they get that washing machine, sell it for some parts, they might make enough to double their salary.
But you know what's the stupid thing, Matthew, that like no one has thought about, and it just hit me. In most areas of Russia, there's not even like any direct connection to a sewer, much less actual water. So how in the world did they even run these things when they bring them back? Like, it's not like their house is connected to water or anything, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, you'd have to have a water hose going into it that has a water supply. You can probably just drain the washing machine just outside or something, like run the hose outside and not put it into the sewer. That would be fine.
Bro, they're going to the village well to get a bucket of water to pour into the washing machine, I guess. Like, that's all they could do because there is no, like, direct connection to, like, any water main in most places. Most places still use, like, a municipal well.
Yeah, somebody was saying fill it manually. Doesn't that like take away the point of the washing machine though? Like you have to go get a bucket of water and throw it in there and the soap too. You're literally in there mixing this. You might as well just slosh it around yourself at that point instead of having the machine circle it.
Dude, it's just really stupid when you think about that, like how that's going to work at all. Like, anyways, also it's even stupider when you think about how Russia works. They didn't have like municipal sewage or water at all. They still really don't. But somehow the whole country is largely electrified. Like, isn't that kind of ass backwards? Like in America, we actually had municipal water supply and sewage before we had electricity. In Russia, they still don't have those two things. They just have electricity.
Yeah, it makes no sense. That tells you they need the electricity to power the TV so they can put that propaganda in your home, but you don't need any water. You can go find that on your own.
Yeah, go to the municipal well, idiot. Like, it's like, okay. And then, like, the municipal well is filled with, like, trace elements of oil from all of the fracking going on around the local area. So, like, there's oil in the water table.
Oh, you need some oil to survive. You make sure your arteries are nice and lubricated, blood. It keeps the cholesterol from forming clots in the blood, blood.
You have cancer now. It's like you have cancer. But we also got to see that the Ukrainians were hitting Russian artillery around Velika Novosilka as well. Also, someone said the ground is frozen. Pipes are hard. Well, I mean, like, if the ground's frozen in Canada, they still have centralized, like, sewage and water. So it can't be that hard. Like, it cannot be that hard. Also, if I'm correct, Norway, Sweden, and Finland are about as frigid, or more frigid for the large part, in some areas, than Russia. And they still have water pipes, water mains, and sewage. So if they can do it, the Russians are not doing it because they're too poor and they're also cheap.
And also, Putin has to add to his trillion-dollar net worth, too.
Putin has the highest personal net worth in the world. Like, he is very wealthy. Hey, Al Roast, we're in a 333. Hey!
Let's go! Hey!
Let's go, baby!
Yeah, but I think Putin. Putin's not the richest person in the world, and of course, they don't have an accurate number on his net worth. But I think Putin's net worth is probably close. I would assume at least over 500 billion. Probably creeping up closer to the $1 trillion mark. I'd assume is basically the entire country of Russia is his piggy bank. But I think the oil barons might be the richest because, of course, they don't publicize that number.
I think so, yeah. Also, we got to see the 128th Mountain Assault Brigade dropping Russians like flies. Man, I'm tired, man. Man, you tired? Man, like flies. They dropping like flies. And they're getting them. They got a quad bike right there. They're about to get another one. They're about to get a Buhanka. Oh, and they got another one. Oh! And they got another one. And oh, there they go. They're running for the hills. Oh, my lord. That guy was carrying like some RPGs or something. I don't know. Oh, my dude. They're all. I don't know what they're carrying on these guys, man. It's like gasoline or something, but they're going up when they get hit.
Oh, there's stuff flying everywhere.
I don't know what is up with this. I've never seen this before. But that's the end of those clips. Wild, to say the least. Moving on from that, we also got to see that the Konka Bridge was wiped out north of Oleski. So the Ukrainians have now completely destroyed the Konka Bridge. You can see that right there. The Konka Bridge has already been heavily damaged. They're about to finish it on off here.
There's a whole bridge, and now there's no bridge.
And that's gone. No more bridge. You swim across.
And what was the munition that hit this bridge, Bliat? Do you know?
I do not know off the top of my head.
Could it have been the new Neptune missile, Bliat?
Neptune missiles are the best in the world. It doesn't appear there was any information in the title about it, and I personally do not know, because the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, I don't believe, published any info on what kind of weapon was actually used for that.
Interesting. I was asking that because the other day when Tuops was hit, the reports were probably a Peklo because it was some new style of weapon that was used. I'm seeing some people today speculate that maybe it was the new Neptune missile that was sent in that Ukraine has. Whatever the case was, it was a domestically produced weapon that Ukraine had that was brand new that they launched at it. I'm still like going with the Peklo personally, but it could have been maybe a Neptune. That could be a correct assumption.
It could have been. It could have been. But moving on out of Kherson, it's now time for us to finally get up to Kyiv, because after 2 full hours of news coverage, it's time for us to get to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. And so without further ado, here is a real long-lasting speech. So, here you go. Speech!
Бажаю здоров'я. Сьогодні провів кадрові зміни в Збройних силах України разом з головкомом Олександром Сирським та міністром оборони Рустемом Умєровим визначили, що новим начальником Генерального штабу буде Андрій Гнат. Бойовий хлопець, і його завдання саме більше бойового досвіду наших бригад в плануванні операцій оборонних та наступальних, а також більш активна розбудова корпусної системи. Все, чому наші бригади навчила війна, має впроваджуватись на 100% вже на рівні планування. Генерал Баргилевич з посади начальника Генштабу переведений в Генеральну інспекцію Міністерства оборони. Сьогодні ж була доповідь головкома щодо бойової обстановки. Бойові дії та наша оборона тривають майже по всій лінії фронту. В багатьох ключових точках. Від Харківщини і Куп'янського напрямку до південних напрямків. Після перемовин у Джиді і появи на столі американської пропозиції щодо тиші на фронті, Росія вкрала ще майже тиждень війни, яка потрібна тільки Росії. Ми зробимо все, щоб ще більше активізувати дипломатію. Зробимо все, щоб дипломатія була результативною. Але кожен день зараз – це захист нашої незалежності, нашої держави, наших людей. І потрібно пам'ятати, саме підтримка нашої армії, всіх наших сил оборони та безпеки України, нашої держави, така підтримка вирішує все. Я дякую кожному і кожній, хто не забуває, що оборона України, стійкість України – це головне. Дякую всім українським воїнам, кожному нашому підрозділу. Дякую кожному і кожній, хто працює на оборону та на нашу державу. І дякую всім українцям за кожен збір для нашої української армії. Потрібно пам'ятати, поки окупант на нашій землі, поки лунають повітряні тривоги, ми маємо захищати Україну. За результатами тижня хочу особливо відзначити воїнів 59-ї окремої штурмової бригади безпілотних сил. Дякую вам. Також 72-га окрема механізована бригада. Це Покровський напрямок. Молодці. 425-й окремий штурмовий полк. Дякую вам за хоробрість при звільненні позицій від окупанта. 100-та, 24-та окремі механізовані бригади. Дякую за ефективне знищення російської техніки і солдатів на Торецькому і Краматорському напрямках. Щойно я говорив з прем'єр-міністром Канади Марком Карні. Я подякував йому за підтримку України, нашого суверенітету і територіальної цілісності, за участь Канади в нашій спільній роботі з партнерами заради того, щоб захистити наших людей, щоб наблизити мир і гарантувати надійну безпеку. Ми обговорили санкції проти Росії, особливо проти танкерного флоту Росії, проти російських банків, проти схем заробітку російської держави. Ми обговорили з прем'єр-міністром Карні результати зустрічі міністрів закордонних справ Групи Семи і підсумковий документ зустрічі доволі сильний. Я хочу подякувати всім партнерам в G7. Канада буде підтримувати Україну і надалі. Це важливо. Важливо, що майже кожного дня Україна отримує нові сигнали щодо підтримки. Нові оборонні пакети, пропозиції спільної дипломатичної роботи та готовність партнерів бути більш активними. Зараз мені міністр оборони Умєров доповів про виконання задач щодо ППО, ракети для «Айрісті», для «Насамсів» та «Сампті». Є хороші результати по контрактуванню артилерії. Будуть додаткові снаряди для нашої армії. Міністр оборони поінформував і про організацію наступного Рамштайну. Готуємось до Брюсселю. Працюємо і над конкретною системою гарантій безпеки для України. І цього тижня була зустріч військових представників у Франції. Готується зустріч в Британії. Перші кроки щодо гарантій безпеки здійснюються. Дякую всім, хто з Україною. Слава Україні!
And
Heroes Slava.
And I was choking there at the last second because I muted my mic and inhaled and I swallowed spit. But nevertheless, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. And that ramps up our day 1117 news segment and moves us on into the second segment of this stream where we get to talk to all of y'all. And boy howdy, what a fun segment it is. We get to talk to y'all, hopefully without me inhaling spit and choking on it, for the remainder of this stream, however long that may last. But I do have to think so many of y'all, all 45,000 of y'all who have watched this stream so far at this point, and also the 9.8 thousand people who were here at the peak. We are entirely honored. I'm appreciative to know that so many people continue to choose this channel as their primary source of news each and every single day. And of course, we hope to be your primary source of news with each and every passing day from this point forward, because there is always an insanely large amount of news coming out from every corner of the world. So with that in mind, a big thanks to all of y'all for watching so far. And Matthew, do we have any more top donors of the night?
Yes, we do have more top donors of the night, and the first one goes to Hal Rose, who's doing that $333 donation. They're one of the largest ones of the night, actually. And huge shout out to Hal for making that happen, as well as Greg Carrier, who put in a 50. And once again, we're now up to $3,151 raised of the $2,500 goal. And thank you all very much once again for helping us to reach that goal, and we appreciate it very much on another Sunday night. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I have to give a massive shout out to all of y'all once again, because time and time again, y'all have proven that y'all have been able to reach the fundraiser goals, and not only that, continue to support American and Western interests around the globe. And so I got to give y'all a massive congratulations on that, because if it wasn't for the entirety of the Lee Spring Army, we wouldn't be able to achieve these massive and incredible feats day in and day out. And so with that, a massive shout out to all of y'all once again. And Matthew, I understand that we have another poll, a very interesting one, because France is expected to announce mobilization for civilians within days. And is it really necessary? And what is everyone thinking about that, Matthew? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So once again, just to reiterate the question, it says France is expected to announce a mobilization for civilians within days. And is it really necessary? And first of all, since I saw someone came in the chat and was getting very crazy about it, and they said, "A source, you liar." So here's my source. The Kyiv Post is one of the articles and one of the news outlets that reported on it. One clarification. When it says mobilization for civilians, that does not mean mandatory military service. That's a different thing. But Emmanuel Macron, if I can think of his name, is trying to mobilize civilians for a war effort, but not mandatory military service. So it's a bit different, but nonetheless, it's still a quote-unquote mobilization of the civilian population. So once again, the big question is it really necessary? 62% said yes, it's a necessary action, while 13% said it actually won't happen, and 12% said it's an overreaction by France. And honestly, I would say this, unless, like, it's the same situation with Poland, basically. They started an actual military draft of their young men, but France is not going to do it quite to that extreme, but they're going to do something a little bit lesser, but sort of similar. Unless they have information saying that a war is going to start, then I really don't see the point behind it. So I'm not really sure what France is seeing to indicate that this is about to turn into a war. So unless they have that info, then it's probably an overreaction in my personal opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
Oh no, Matthew, they're getting mouthy. Oh God, but beyond that, Matthew said to Matthew, "I didn't call you a liar. I simply asked for a source, but that doesn't fit your narrative, of course." Well, I'll tell you this, Matthew. I'll tell you this, to be entirely honest with you. Well, isn't that the person who said that, Matthew? Isn't that the person right there?
Oh, yeah, I thought you were talking about me for a minute.
I'll tell you this, Matthew. Not that Matthew, not the one who's here with me, the Matthew in the chat. I'll tell you this really quickly. That is calling someone a liar, asking for a source. I'll tell you why. Because to say source largely shows us that you are not believing what we're saying, and you think it's bullshit, and you're trying to call us out on it by telling us to provide you with a source. That's what that means. Like, I know that you're probably going to try and contort that now differently, because we actually provided sources now, and now you might feel like a fool, but that's largely how that comes across.
Well, I wasn't taking offense for him asking for a source. What he originally said in the statement, he called me a liar. He said it's a military exercise in Romania. Stop spreading misinformation with that poll. That's calling it a lie. So
Yeah.
that was a statement I took an issue with. It wasn't him asking for a source. Fair enough to ask for a source, and I gave it just then. It's the Kyiv Post, and also Barron's, and also several other articles reported on it as well. So it's not like a secret thing or something like that. But I can't believe this, honestly. The cult of Matt is not just the cult of one alone Matt. It's supposed to be the whole group. So I have no idea where this Matt on Matt violence has come from out of the blue like this. I've never seen such anarchy in the cult of Matt. The cult of Matt does not operate on a level like Syria is operating, where they're just going at it with everybody. We don't do that. So this Matt needs to get back in line or else. But anyways,
man, look at this. Now he's getting pissed. I didn't call you a liar. He just said that we were spreading misinformation and then demanded a source, pretty much insinuating that we were just coming up with it and we just made it up. So I mean, if you want to leave, I don't really think we're going to be losing anything of value. That's kind of like a Karen acting like a bitch in Home Depot and then saying, I'm never buying anything from here again. Like every worker is breathing a sigh of relief at that point, to be honest with you. So if you want to leave, no skin off of our back. So with that in mind, it is time for us to move on into those actual questions. But before we do, I do want to make sure to address this poll because it was such a contentious poll that we got a Matthew up and out of here. Not the enforcer Matt, just some random Matthew up and out of here because he tried to insinuate that Matthew was a liar, which is just insane because Matthew checks everything that he says. So a little bit ludicrous to say that.
Except for my blunder today with mixing up the fighter jet aircraft, but we'll just sort of floss over that one.
Oh, we'll floss it with floss.
Honestly though, I got flamed so bad for that. Honestly, that was a rookie mistake. Honestly, today I realized after I ended the video, I was listening back to it as I have to edit the video, and I was like, I think that might have been an F-18, but I was like, okay, I think I got them mixed up. But I was like, damn, like it's already too late. It's already like 1 or 1:30 at that point. I'm like, I can't re-record the whole video over that one thing. So I just had to post a correction in the comments down there and let that be it. But nonetheless, I was flooded. I was roasted like a Costco chicken roaster. It was like nothing. It was like nobody's ever seen before. He was roasted. He was skewered. Do you even know what you're talking about? Do you even know what you're doing? And I said, Yes, I do. If you'll read at the very top, there's a correction there, buddy. But they had to scroll past the correction and scroll right to the compose button and go right at it. So, anyways, crazy indeed. Also, if you want to know our source, that's totally fine. Usually, we show them on screen while we're talking about something, but if you say that we're a liar spreading misinformation and then say source, that generally doesn't go well. Like, I'll just be honest, it doesn't go that well because it's pretty rude to just call someone a liar off the bat. You don't really know until you ask for a source. If you ask for a source and then we don't provide one, then you probably have grounds to call us a liar. But, just going off the bat and trying to say that people are spreading misinformation because they put up a poll, that's a little bit odd. Also, man, didn't this Matthew say that he was going to leave and he's still here? Like, I still see him in the chat. What's going on with that? You having a problem? Having a problem finding the door out? I mean, if you want to leave, you can. But you said you were going to leave. This must be the Temu Matt. This is not the real deal. This is not the all-American Matt, the 100% beef burger Matt. This is the Temu Matt, the Alibaba Matt, the one that shipped via let's see here, Air China.
I never called anyone a liar. Saying that someone's spreading misinformation is calling them a liar because you're saying that the information that they're spreading is untrue, and something that is untrue is a lie. So you called someone a liar. If you cannot logically make that dissertation, you may have to leave. I'm just going to put that out there right now. So I'll let you think about it. But you said you were going to leave, and you can either leave on your own accord, or we might have to help you to leave because man, they're getting there they went. It's Matthew and Matthew violence. He got banned.
Oh my gosh, it felt like one of my own. It was one of my own.
Man,
they had to go.
Man, had to leave. Man, that honestly, do you feel like a disturbance in the force when that happens? Like when you have to ban a Matthew?
Man, it's tough. I'll tell you what, it's tough. Although he didn't go by Matt, though. He went by Matthew. So, I don't know if he qualifies for the cult.
Man, that's crazy right there. Crazy. He was like, I'm out of here. Like a Karen, dude. He was like, I'm never buying from here again. And then chose to stay after that. It's like, well, you already made your grand exit. It's like, you can't stay. Like, this guy is almost like Studebaker, Anthony Studebaker back in the day, who runs the show, actually. He's actually our boss. But anyways, with that, it's time for us to actually move on into some good questions. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right. So with that, we are now moving on from that poll because that was our last poll to get to. And we're now jumping back into our live chat questions. And of course, we have our Morse code decoders of the stream. Tonight, we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J., Paul Schultz, David Millsap, Roy Fluffiness, Arabelle Garbo, Joni Dog, and Norm Pritchett. They said the Morse for tonight says, let this be a message to Iran that they will be next if they don't mind our warnings. LLT, LSA. Great job as usual.
And And that is down to money. Y'all hit that dead on the nail. That was the jackpot. And y'all got the Morse code message correct. And I hope it is a little message to Iran. But Iran doesn't do well at reading messages because I think most of their government can't read. I think they're mostly illiterate. But once again, that's not that shocking because, half of the United States is technically nearly illiterate. So I guess if Iran was mostly illiterate, not that far behind the curve. Also, Matthew, what is the literacy rates in China? Literacy rate in China. I'm interested in that. Those aged 15 and above reached 97% in 2020. Well, how literate are they though?
So I think China's education system is actually, I'm not saying this because I'm against the United States or something, by the way. I know someone's going to be like, oh, there you are with those anti-American sentiments again. I'm a 100% all-American, beef patty American, all the way. But I think China has a pretty good education system. I think that's one thing they're really good at.
Let's see. Hold up. The average is, okay, so their literacy rate is a little bit skewed. I remembered this because in China they don't have really an alphabet per se. They kind of do, but not really. You have to learn specific characters. So you have to learn a minimum amount of characters, meaning a specific amount of words to have literacy. So it's not exactly, like being able to read and comprehend brand new words, because you actually have to be introduced to a new word or a new character to even know what it is. So in China, the literacy rate is just based off of, if you know 3,500 characters, then you're technically literate. And I believe there's something like, if I remember correctly, 12,000, maybe even 20,000 characters in the Chinese language, or Mandarin for the large part. So to technically be literate in China, you really only have to know, I think it's 20% of the characters to be literate. So, with that in mind, that's just kind of like a little bit of a low hurdle, to jump over. You only need to know 20% of all the words to be classified as literate, because only about 3,500 characters are used in common day speaking in China.
Yeah, maybe so. But I wonder, outside of just the language thing with the letters and all that, things like that, the math, science, all the other things, are they good at that? Because, they seem to have a pretty strong industry when it comes to things like that.
Maybe so. Let's check the literacy rate in Iran. I'm sure it has to be abysmal.
Oh boy.
Oh,
dear
80%. So 20% of the population just can't read. This is just any kind of literacy. 20% of them just can't read. Also, apparently, women can read more than men, which kind of feels a little bit wrong. I'm not going to lie. I think that might be incorrect because, as we all know, Iran has a bit of a thing with women getting any real kind of education, or really treating women equally for that matter. So the fact that they would be able to read more than men, that's a little interesting. But let's see what we can find here. Education in Iran. This is a flag in the Ministry of Education. They do terribly with flags and icons in Iran. All of them look like Microsoft Paint.
They don't have an art department or an art class there, apparently.
Apparently not. Apparently not. Let's see here. The literacy is around the 80s. The total is somewhere around 82%. So incredibly low for most of the modern world. But let's see here. And let's see. Sadly, dude, literacy information, literacy percentages, is pretty hard to find, really. The U.S. is only one of the few, I think, that actually does the literacy stuff a good bit. But let's see here. Yeah, I don't know. I would assume that if 20% of them just can't read at all, I'm sure that many of the people who are technically literate may not really read that well. But anyways, with that, some people have been asked, do you think China has a good education system? And interestingly enough, it's almost split down the middle, but it appears that most people actually believe that China has a good education system rather than not. So Matthew, what do people think about that?
So a whopping 55%, not really whopping, more like almost even, about 55% said yes, and 46% said no. And I would say that they at least have a mildly good education system. It can't be really horrible. Otherwise, they wouldn't have a very strong industry in STEM, which they appear to have. I know some people are going to say, well, China is known for ripping off IP, intellectual property, from the United States, and that's probably how they get all their stuff. To some extent, yes, but to some extent, they actually do have their own innovation. It's just in areas that, is sometimes helpful. Like, for example, they have innovation on the software front of things, and things like that. So they do their own stuff, and they also do rip off our stuff from time to time, actually quite a bit. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that they probably have a pretty decent education system, but I have a feeling like a lot of things Chinese is really overblown. Because do you think, Matthew? Let me make sure to go back to this really quick. Actually, no, that's the first one. We want to go to the second one. Do you think the kids growing up in Hainan Island Village here are getting a good education? Because I'd assume not.
Well, it'd be the same as us. Like if you looked at, like, for example, where we grew up, you'd think, there's no way them boys are getting a good education out there in the backwoods of Alabama. But we got a halfway decent education. Like, it wasn't horrific. It wasn't the best, I'll be honest, but it was okay.
Where the hell is the school here even? There's not one. There's not one in this whole town. There's no school here. So I am assuming they don't have a school in this town, man. I guess you have to go to the big town, like Chiang Mai County here. Well, actually, Xinjiang, which is very hard to pronounce. Oh, wait a minute, there's a kindergarten, and it's just a field. Yeah, I don't really know if they have a good education here, to be entirely honest with you. What is this? Muse? It's a bar. All right. Well, we'll take that for what it is. But anyways, with that, it's time for us to get on into some questions, because I'm sure we got some juicy ones. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right. So jumping back into our juicy questions, our first one goes to PWN29, who says, apparently the Houthis attacked the aircraft carrier, or U.S. aircraft carrier, and could that invoke Article 5 or not, because the USA attacked first?
It's largely outside the geographical parameters that Article 5 protects for the large part. So technically, no. Really for that reason. Like, they could attack the United States first, and it still wouldn't really trigger Article 5 because it's really outside of the geographical parameters. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Sheffield Steel UK, who says, the only way that I see the Houthis actually giving in to the U.S. might is if the U.S. puts boots on the ground. And do you agree?
I would agree. I think that U.S. boots on the ground in Yemen is necessary to end this once and for all. Some people don't like that idea, and I don't get that, because it's like, do you want, like, would you have been against fighting Hitler because it would require us fighting? It's like, I honestly think that evil should be put down. And it's like, these people are evil. They're extremists. And I believe that we should take whatever actions necessary to put them down. And I think that ground forces is really the best way to actually do that, with a definitive certainty that they will be completely put out once and for all. So with that, I hope that
The only catch is, though, they would have to get it done really quick, or otherwise they would have to declare war. At least by legality, they should. If they do or not, that's another story. But they could send people in on the ground, but ultimately, though, they would have to notify Congress after, I think it's 60 days or something like that. I can't remember the exact days or something. But they'd have to notify Congress, and then they'd have to either declare war or pull the powers back out.
Well, I mean, we didn't have to do that in Syria. We had U.S. forces all over the place in Syria. We never technically declared war on anyone.
That's true, but were we really fighting anybody, or were we just there for like peacekeeping?
Yeah, I mean, we fought the Wagner. We defended the Kurds against the Assad regime. We fought ISIS. We were fighting everyone in there for a good bit.
I would say that we were probably finding a different justification for it. I don't think there's any way you could justify the Yemen situation as anything other than a direct conflict with the Yemeni Houthis, which would basically be a war. So there's always some way to like word it really fancy where it's like, oh, this isn't really a war. This is just a special military operation or something. So we don't have to declare war. We just send the people in and take care of it. And if it takes months and months and months, then it's whatever. But technically, though, I think they're supposed to declare war.
Well, what if we send in, Matthew, as an idea, what if we send in Marine Expeditionary Units to support and bolster and help to defend the Yemeni government from the Houthis in the Yemeni civil war? And then we just, every once in a while happen to, get an armed engagement with the Houthis and just happen to have some sort of a lightning offensive where we just took a little extra ground here and there time and time again until they were eventually gone.
Yeah, maybe so. Honestly, I'll be straight up honest. I'm not a fan of putting boots on the ground in Yemen because I just don't want to put forces back in the Middle East again. Like when it comes to actually fighting a direct war in the Middle East, I say just keep bombing the place. Keep bombing it until eventually they either give up or they're gone, one or the other. And don't put the men and women of the military at risk over the Houthis, because we can take care of them with the airstrikes. We can take care of them with that. They may not be totally eradicated when it comes to like stopping the aggression, but that'll chill it pretty good.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if that was true, then this would have been fixed under Biden because he was bombing them, and it wasn't. And it's going to just keep going. We're just going to keep bombing them for who knows how long. It could go on for like 10 years. And then we're just sitting there saying, well, if we bomb them enough and we just keep on going in that circular cycle and they keep attacking global shipping.
I mean, maybe so, but the other side of the coin is this, though. Right now, what we're doing different than what we did under the last presidency is this is going to be a sustained bombing campaign. Like, it's going to keep going indefinitely, or at least they're saying it's going to go indefinitely until the Houthis give in completely. Under the last guy, he did do strikes just like this, but they were sporadic. They were from time to time as needed, and it was not a continued campaign over possibly weeks. So I think from a psychological standpoint, this is going to have a bigger impact on the Houthis. And if whether or not they want to keep going or not, it's going to probably persuade them maybe to call it quits or either back off temporarily until they can regroup.
But you know something else, Matthew? I think we don't have to declare war against these people because they're a unrecognized terrorist group.
What was the justification used during like the like other situations where we've been in the Middle East? Like, forget Syria. Like, we've been in the Middle East and fought a war without calling it a war before. I just can't remember which one it is.
I think the general justification is that they're terrorist forces and the U.S. Is at war against terrorist forces. So we just go in there and wipe people out because they're terrorist forces. I think that's really the justification, because there was no justification given at all for when we started to directly fight against ISIS. We just went in there and did it, and it didn't really seem like it caused any problems or anyone even bucked it. So I think we could just use the same justification. Well, I just smacked my teeth together right there. In Yemen, is that they're a terrorist force. We don't have to have an official declaration of war. They're not an actual recognized country or anything for that matter. So we just go in there and wipe them out.
Yeah, maybe so. It seems like basically the general rule of thumb is, I think this is the way the U.S. looks at it. If there's a conflict in the Middle East because of how unstable that region stays, then generally they try to avoid declaring war because it's just considered an ongoing thing. Also, someone asked in the comments, she said, was the war on terror ever officially concluded? I don't know. It doesn't seem like we really conclude anything in the Middle East. It's just like an ongoing like sequel to the first time we were there. So, it's probably never going to be declared a war. Like, they probably should. That seems like the right thing. The legal thing to do would be to send it to Congress and let them decide whether or not it's a war or not. But it seems like the president kind of just does what they want. Not the current one, just all of them. They just do what they want in the Middle East, just like a free-for-all.
Honestly, the whole region would be stable if we just dealt with Iran, because they're the ones who keep on funding the instability. They're the ones who fund Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. They're the ones who started the uprising in Syria against the interim government. Honestly, they were the reason why the whole thing started in the first place, was by supporting Assad. So if we just took care of the Iranians, the whole region would largely become a lot more stable overnight.
Yeah, it would. It just seems that we're a little bit hesitant to do that for whatever reason. If they don't have a nuclear weapon, then it's like, what are we worried about? Are we worried that Russia's going to come to their aid or something? We're going to get into a direct conflict with Russia or China. That could be the only thing that I could see that would prevent us from actually just going into Iran and taking care of them. That would be if there was like one war to end all the wars in the Middle East, or at least attempt to end them. It would be the situation with Iran if we could go in there and do that. And especially like, they have the perfect justification for it right now. They're on the verge of creating a nuke. So now would be the time you could justify it without too much backlash, I would assume. And you could get that done with, because like you said, if you can take Iran out and take that really radical government out of the equation, that will take care of most of the proxy forces. That'll take away their big, great leader at that point. So they'll largely be sort of fractured from that point forward. And you can take care of them a lot easier. Let Israel take care of that. And we can take care of the big daddy Iran and get them out of there.
Yeah, I think that would generally be the way to fix the whole thing. But at this point, we're having to deal with the, I guess you could say, the symptoms and not the disease. So I think that a ground expedition in Yemen would probably be the best way to do it, in my opinion. It ends it once and for all. You don't have to come back to it a year later and go, let's bomb them again. It's like they're done for. They'll cease to exist for the large part. They might. Go ahead.
Also, by the way, someone said, I've heard that phrase before, the war to end all wars. Yeah, that refers to World War One. That was obviously not the last one. There will never be an end to all wars. That's just a figurative statement. But at least like when it comes to like the current instability, the current wars in the Middle East, Iran is like the chaos agent. They're the ones who is basically pushing all this stuff forward. They're funding the proxies. They're funding everybody that's against Israel. They're funding them, and they're actively pushing to destroy the United States if they could, which they really can't. But they're trying to get the next best thing, which is Israel. They're trying to destroy them instead. So it's just Iran. The Iranian government is never going to calm down unless they're destroyed. That's the bottom line of it. They're hell bent on destroying the West.
Yeah, that's true. If we dealt with them, we wouldn't really even have to deal with the proxies. They most likely just disappear due to a lack of funding, and also any kind of leadership or guidance. So if we dealt with them, the whole thing would be done and over with. So honestly, that ought to be a good push and a call to get rid of them, because at that point, there wouldn't really be any instability in the Middle East. It would be a fairly stable region again, because this is kind of like this Iran to the Middle East is kind of what, let me think of something similar somewhere in the world. Iran in the Middle East is kind of like what the cartels are to Central and South America, a generally destabilizing factor. If you could deal with the cartels, Central and South America would be fairly stable. It wouldn't be wealthy, obviously, that would still take some time, but it would still be a very stable region. Iran is much like that. They largely sponsor and support any instability that's currently going on, because look at any of the areas where there is something that is destabilizing an area, and then figure out who is funding and financing them. So Hezbollah and Hamas are both funded and financed by Iran. So are the Houthis. And the uprising that's currently going on in Syria that's pretty much created the second Syrian civil war, only months after the first one ended, is largely supported and funded by Iran. So literally every single region right now that's in some form of a state of conflict right now is Iranian-backed and supported. So if you got rid of them, all of those conflicts come to an end because there's no one funding them or supporting them at that point. So there's just no combat activity, because to be able to fight you have to have money and weapons, and if the Iranians aren't around to provide them that money and those weapons, then everything that we're seeing right now, it comes to a complete end. Honestly though, the whole Palestine thing wouldn't end, because the people in the Gaza Strip have been radicalized for decades, to be entirely honest, so they would still be hostile. It's just that there wouldn't really be enough weapons or money to be able to actually act out on that hostility for the large part. It'd be fairly minimal at that point. So that's really the issue. Like, if you dealt with Iran, the whole thing fixes itself. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also a big shout out to Nerdo, by the way, who put in a $100 donation to the fundraiser. And big shout out to Nerdo for also helping to bring us up to $3,311 raised of the goal, which is about almost $1,000 above our original goal. So huge shout out to Nerdo. But we are now moving on to our next question. And this one goes to Culp who says, do we have a new destroyer in the Gulf of Mexico or Gulf of America, whichever one you want to call it, or nah?
We do. We actually have a destroyer right now somewhere off of the coast of Mexico. It's apparently involved in some sort of a border operation. I didn't really understand at all what the concept behind that is, but it is down there right now, so that is true. So I hope that answers that somewhat well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to, let's see here, it goes to Bia Arthur, who said, I saw the post on X about the Serbian protest in Belgrade. And is there any concerns about the Serbian president this week and that issue?
I think you had to heavily censor that one, Matty. I think I saw that one come in. Yeah. It really, I can't make a comment on that. That would more so become a domestic political matter in the U.S. But as far as the situation goes in Belgrade, it appears that there's a lot of people in Serbia who are not a supporter of the current government or the pro-Russian relationship that the Serbian nation has with the Russian Federation. So that would be the best comment that I can make, given the circumstances, without getting political. So I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one is going to go to, let's see here, Chris Chastain, who says, here's a question. Where is the Yemeni opposition? While the Navy is pounding them, it would be a good time to move against them.
The Yemeni opposition is incredibly weak. To give a little bit of an idea here, how weak they are. They don't really have a population to work with. The Yemeni central government only controls the area in red. The area in green is controlled by the Houthis. The areas in yellow and orange are controlled by some weird interim government things. But they are pro PLC, what the Republic of Yemen for the large part, or the General People's Congress, whatever you want to call it. But they are pro aligned to that, so they are all friendly to the government. It's just that none of them really control any population centers. All of the major population centers in Yemen are on the west coast. Most of those are controlled by the Houthis, so the central government really doesn't have a lot of actual manpower to draw from to be able to fight the Houthis. So that's why there really isn't anything going on, and the conflict's largely frozen, is because the Houthis control most of the population centers at this point and have been for years. So I hope that addresses that well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Thomas D. Orazio, who said, Matt, you do bring up a good point, which begs the question, will we learn to defeat these groups with lower cost weapons platforms? And honestly, Thomas, I would say we probably could, but I think part of the deterrence factor of the U.S. getting involved in something is that they know, kind of like when Israel gets involved in something, that they're not coming in with small-time weapons. They're coming in with the big stuff. And as you can see right now in Yemen, when we go in, it's a big guns blazing type event. It's not small. And I think that makes the enemies of the United States even more scared to mess with us. So we probably could use lower cost weapons like drones and things like that to target, but it wouldn't have the same effect of scaring the hell out of the enemy into compliance. And I think that's a big part of the equation as well. It's probably worth the extra cost. But Enforcer, what say you?
As far as we are concerned in the United States, we really don't have to make our military as affordable as, say, the Ukrainians do. The Ukrainians are having to specialize their weapons to deal with the minuscule budget or really funding that they have, even from internally and externally combined. The Ukrainians really don't have a budget to work with. So they have to make their weapon systems cheap, so that way they're able to get the same kind of bang for far less buck. But for the United States, we really don't have to. And also, there's a lot of things that come with producing weapons that are cheaper. Higher failure rates, not enough research and development. They may not be as cutting edge and as advanced that we need to have an edge over our major opponents around the world. So as far as how it's going right now in Western Yemen, I think that it's fairly okay. I don't really believe that the U.S. should be attempting to shave down cost on the military too much. And I know some people will say things like, well, what about the $5,000 wrench? Well, stuff like that, obviously, that should be cut down. But as far as cutting down on the actual weapons that the armed forces can use, when we do that, we're starting to put a lot more of our own service members' lives in danger. Because who's to say that those weapon systems don't have high dud or failure rates, or that they may not be able to be counted on at a time of need because they're just so cheaply made, or they may not be as competent or have enough firepower as the current weapon systems we have. So I largely would say that for that reason, I think the general situation with the cost of the weaponry is all right. And also it speaks for itself how effective it is for the large part compared to other weapon systems that are used by Russia, Ukraine, China, or really anyone else in the world that isn't in Europe or in North America. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to AF Kaplan, who says, I was wondering if you have any follow-up information regarding the Panama blackout, what caused it, and when will power be restored? And also, I did report on that in the short war video today. Panama did have a nationwide blackout because one of their power plants had a major explosion, and it caused it to catch on fire, and it caused all their power to go out for a long time. I have not gotten any updates on that. I'm not sure if the power is back on. I would imagine it probably is, but I'm not really sure. But what caused it is a mystery. So, of course, like I said in the video, Panama is a hotbed of controversial things right now. Of course, there's the Panama Canal issue that the U.S. has with Panama. And also China just basically got booted off the canal with one of their shell companies basically getting booted off the whole situation. So there's a lot of people that might want to mess with Panama, but there's no telling. But Enforcer, what say you?
It's really hard to say, like Matthew's saying, who the culprit behind that would be if there was any. It may have actually been that there was just some form of a boiler explosion or something similar that happened that was just a raw incident that could happen, and the power grid was knocked out. But it's really hard to say with any kind of certainty exactly what it was. So I hope that does address that somewhat well, although we really don't have a good answer to that. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who said, if NATO gives guarantee that Ukraine will not join NATO, but it is written like the Budapest Memorandum, then it will not be binding. And do you think this is going to happen?
I have a feeling that that's probably not going to happen this time because it appears that Europe is fairly committed to having some sort of an actual defensive treaty with Ukraine, even if it's outside of a NATO framework. So I don't think that's going to be happening this time around. The U.S. might try that, but I don't think the British or the French will. So I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the final question of the night. And so who's like the last person through in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one goes to K-Dub, who says, do you think that the fact that Russia coerced the United States to take Kellogg off of the diplomatic team, that means that he could have been hindering the progress or not? And love the stream.
I don't think he was necessarily hindering the progress. I think he may have been calling the BS from the start and saying something like, look, y'all don't really seem sincere in actually bringing this to a close. Y'all seem like y'all are just trying to hamstring this. And then the rest was like, he has tested his regime, get him out. And then they kicked him out. I think that's more so what it was than he was hindering the progress or process at all, because it wouldn't really make much sense that he would be. It's not like he's an agent of Ukraine or anything like that. He's a federal employee of the U.S. government. So I would generally assume that that probably was not the case. It was just more so that he was maybe going in a little bit more aggressive and pretty much doing what we did to Ukraine, take it or leave it, or really encouraging that kind of a thing. Or it could have just been that the Russians were wanting him removed just for the fact that he's largely said things that were positive about Ukraine in the past. It could be any of those, but it's really hard to say because it could be any one of those options. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream, and an absolutely amazing fundraiser at that. We were able to raise $3,328 in support of Nova Ukraine, an absolutely incredible fundraiser by an absolutely amazing Lee Spring Army. I have to thank all of y'all so much once again for watching tonight, and if y'all did enjoy, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We've actually reached a whopping 338,697 subscribers. Woo-wee! We're about to hit 339 here soon. Ole mole! But beyond that, thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all probably tomorrow. I'll probably be making a short war summary tomorrow, but we will not be running a stream tomorrow, of course. But we will definitely see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of, well, the next 48 hours, actually, of news from around the world. And so with that, a big thanks to you all once again for watching, and we will see you all then. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And thank you all once again for another fantastic Sunday night fundraiser stream once again. And thank you all for donating to our charity of the night, which was Nova Ukraine, and a whopping $3,328 raised, which is far above the goal. And huge shout out once again for making that possible. And with that, folks, like the Enforcer said, he'll be seeing you tomorrow on the Short War video. And we'll both be seeing you again on Tuesday night on the next nightly War News stream. But with that, of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.